Chapter 909. Chu Mu settled down temporarily in the border town, waiting for the right time to enter West Tiger Great Region. Counting, there were several tens of thousands of young genius swordsmen coming from all over the place, gathering in this border town, waiting to enter West Tiger Great Region and West Tiger City to participate in the competition for the sects of various powerful forces. Several tens of thousands of people were actually very few compared to so many forces, but those who dared to come here were either those whose sword intent had been refined to the 7th rank, or those who had some special ability and were confident of standing out from the crowd. It could be said that most of the people gathered here were true geniuses. West Tiger Great Region was not easy to enter, unless one had the strength of a sword of Gojosian. Even an ordinary sword of Gojosian would not dare to move alone, because West Tiger Great Region was home to countless powerful immemorial beasts, some of which even had the bloodline of immemorial divine beasts. After staying in the border town for a few days, there were conflicts every day. After all of them were geniuses who were valued by their respective forces, and felt that they were superior to others. Sometimes they would be annoyed by a glance from the other party, and quarrel or even fight. Some conflicts were due to fighting for rooms in inns, and some were caused by battle maniacs who went around challenging geniuses. Like Chu Mu, he was challenged 3 times. Among the 3 challengers, one of them had both sword intent and profound refined to the 8th rank, but was only at the middle stage of the 8th rank. Under Chu Mu's peak 8th rank sword intent, he could not resist at all. Soon, Chu Mu's reputation became prominent, and he stood side by side with the other 3 geniuses whose sword intent had been refined to the peak 8th rank. Xiahou Shan, Long Zun, and Jiang Kaidai came from 3 major clans, and were also the number 1 geniuses of their clans whose sword intent had been refined to the peak 8th rank. As for Chu Mu, after asking around, they found out that he came from a small place called Purple Ling Continent, and was a disciple of a small force called Sky Edge Sword Palace. After learning about Chu Mu's background, everyone was very surprised. They originally thought that he was a genius nurtured by some major faction. They didn't expect that his background was so low, yet his talent was comparable to Xiahou Shan and the other 2. Therefore, among the 4 of them, the most famous one was Chu Mu. In everyone's eyes, he was a commoner genius. Naturally, Xiahou Shan and Long Zun sent people to invite Chu Mu, offering all kinds of conditions, promising all kinds of benefits, wanting Chu Mu to become a member of their family. Unfortunately, Chu Mu's goal was to enter the West Tiger territory. Joining one of the great forces there was much better than joining their family. Of course, if he accepted the other party's invitation, other than being able to join a large power, he would also be able to obtain the resources of those clans. However, this would mean that he would be under the control of others in the future. This was not something that Chu Mu wanted. Because there were too many people, it wasn't convenient for him to cultivate normally. During these few days, Chu Mu didn't comprehend the undying sword intent. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. In the sky above the border town, a black shadow appeared. That black shadow grew bigger at a very fast speed and was rapidly approaching. A terrifying sonic boom came from afar, like a tsunami. The loud sound alarmed the geniuses in the border town. Many of them raised their heads to look at the sky. That black shadow was rapidly growing, and the outline was already visible. It was a huge flying ship. What a huge flying ship! Some of the geniuses stared at the flying ship that had arrived in the sky above the border town and was slowly descending. Their faces were full of surprise. Chu Mu also saw it. It was indeed a huge flying ship. It was at least 1,000 meters long, more than 300 meters wide, and more than 300 meters tall. It was brown in color with red lines around the edges. It looked heavy and simple. Beside this huge flying ship, there was an obvious symbol. It was a slender and nimble hand that looked very lifelike. This huge flying ship came from the Western Tiger City. It was prepared to bring the geniuses here to the Western Tiger City. Of course, it wasn't without a price. 1,000 high-grade origin crystals per person. This was the cost of riding this huge flying ship to the Western Tiger City. Origin crystals were the currency of the ancient world, just like the desolate stone of the Heaven Wasteland domain. High-grade origin crystals were energy crystals that were suitable for king-level experts to absorb. Its value was extraordinary. Ordinary god-congealing realm swordsmen couldn't take it out at all. However, the people who came here were all geniuses. Every one of them came prepared. Although 1,000 high-grade origin crystals wasn't a small amount, they could all take it out. It was just that the majority of them didn't have much left after taking it out. This really made them feel pained for a long time. On this huge flying ship, there were many people maintaining order to avoid unnecessary conflict. The people who maintained order were all king-level experts. Therefore, no one dared to be too presumptuous. The 1,000-meter-long flying ship was 300 meters wide and tall. It was divided into more than 10 levels. The centermost level was the cafeteria. The highest level was a huge sword battle arena in the center. Surrounding it were tables and chairs. It was divided into 3 levels, top, middle, and bottom. It could accommodate tens of thousands of people at the same time. On average, every level of this flying ship could accommodate 3,000 to 4,000 people. It was also very spacious. More than 10 levels could accommodate 50,000 to 60,000 people. Therefore, the tens of thousands of geniuses of the border town all entered. There was no need to fight for a room. When everyone entered the room, they all breathed a sigh of relief. They instantly felt that the 1,000 high-grade origin crystals were worth it. They didn't feel pained anymore. Not bad. After Chu Mu entered the room, he looked around and secretly nodded his head. The room was about 50 to 60 square meters. It was simple and simple. The things used to decorate it were all high-quality goods. The furs on the chairs made it very comfortable to sit on. Such an environment would indeed make people feel comfortable. Especially after squeezing into a room in an ordinary inn for 10 days in the border town, the contrast was even more obvious. It was easier to accept from a psychological point of view. 1,000 high-grade origin crystals. There are more than 40,000 people. That's more than 40 million high-grade origin crystals. Chu Mu couldn't help but sigh. He secretly thought that money came really quickly. However, this huge flying ship would probably consume a lot of origin crystals for a trip. At this time, a voice sounded and spread into every room. "Hello everyone. Welcome to the Sky Raider flying ship. It will take half a year to reach West Tiger City from the border town. In this half a year, everyone can cultivate in their rooms. You can also go to the cafeteria in the middle level to enjoy delicious food. You can also go to the sword battle arena to spar. You can also go to the deck to enjoy the scenery." The voice sounded quite young. "I wish everyone a good time." It was a very polite speech. It should be the owner of this flying ship. Chu Mu didn't care. He sat cross-legged on the futon, took out the imperishable sword, and began to comprehend the imperishable sword essence. After all, he hadn't carefully comprehended it for 10 days. He had to make good use of the next half a year on the flying ship. He couldn't waste it, and he couldn't neglect his cultivation. Now his cultivation was the Deshang of the God Condensation realm. As he cultivated every day, his sword origin became thicker and thicker, gradually approaching the peak of the Deshang. The cultivation of the heaven-seizing technique was also in progress. This was very important. It was related to whether Chu Mu could be promoted to the sword of Gojoseon. He was also very helpless about his cultivation talent. There was no other way. He had such a low starting point. If it weren't for a fortuitous encounter, he wouldn't have been able to reach this step now. Thinking about other real geniuses, which one of their cultivation talent was lower than the 4th grade. Fortunately, comprehension was his advantage. If he used it well, he would go further and longer. Half a year was actually not long at all. Sometimes it felt like it would pass in the blink of an eye. Some people began to cultivate as soon as they entered the room, while others went outside and looked around. It was the first time for them to see a huge flying ship that was 1,000 meters long. Even geniuses like Xiaoho Mountain revered dragon Jiang Kaidai had only heard of such a huge flying ship in the West Tiger territory. They had never taken it in person. From this point alone, it could be seen how big the gap between their family and those forces in the West Tiger territory was. The first floor under the deck of the sky-conquering airship was the place where the crew of the flying ship lived. In one of the large rooms there were many people sitting. The leader was a handsome young man in his 20s. "How is it?" the young man asked in a gentle voice. If Chu Mu had heard it, he would have confirmed that he was the one who spoke in the room just now. "Young master, I've made a thorough investigation. This time there are a total of 43,500 geniuses. Among them, there are 25,000 who have refined their sword intent or profound to the peak of 6th revolution, 13,300 who have refined their sword intent or profound to the 7th revolution, 6,200 who have refined their sword intent or profound to the 7th revolution, 1,500 who have refined their sword intent or profound to the 8th revolution, and 500 who have refined their sword intent or profound to the 8th revolution." A middle-aged woman stood up and said meticulously, "One had to admit that their intelligence was very good. In less than a day, they had investigated the number of geniuses, their strength, and so on. It sounded like there were a lot of geniuses, but upon deeper thought, there were not many of them. Because the immemorial world was very big. Even though the human race was declining and only occupied a small portion of the territory, there were still many human races living in it. Like Purple Ling Continent, it was only one of the lowest-level human habitat. Purple Ling Continent and other human territories stronger than Purple Ling Continent, there were thousands of them in West Tiger territory. Purple Ling Continent had more than 10 geniuses who had refined their sword intent or profound to the 7th revolution. It was not impossible for regions larger than Purple Ling Continent to have even more geniuses. On average, there were thousands of continents and each continent only had a dozen or so geniuses. As for those who had refined their sword intent to the 8th revolution, there might only be one in several continents. After thinking about it, it was not a lot. If Purple Ling Continent did not have Chu Mu, there would not be any geniuses surpassing the 7th revolution. Moreover, there were more geniuses from Purple Ling Continent this time. "Arrange a sword art duel first, we will slowly recruit them when we have time," the young man said. Chapter 9-10. Soon, voices were heard in every room again. "Hello everyone, I am the vice-captain of this airship. I have a piece of good news for everyone." A deep middle-aged man's voice was heard. "Everyone has been working together for half a year. In order to improve each other's relationship and to let everyone have a better time, I announce on behalf of the captain that a sword duel will be held in the middle deck 3 days later. The winner of a 100-win streak will be rewarded with 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals. The winner of the duel will be rewarded with 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals. 10,000 origin crystals. 100,000 origin crystals." Many people jumped up. To board this airship, everyone had to pay 1,000 upper-grade origin crystals. For most of the genius swordsmen, it was a huge amount of wealth. 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals was enough to tempt them. Even Chu Mu and the others were a little tempted. Then, 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals was enough to tempt everyone, including Xiaoho Shan, Long Zun, and Jiang Kaidai from the 3 great clans. 3 days later, with my sword skills, I will definitely be able to win a 100-win streak. 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals, that is mine. Most of the swordsmen were full of confidence and were eager to show off. At least, they wanted to win a 100-win streak and get 10,000 upper-grade origin crystals. Everyone was not against a sword duel. Firstly, there was a chance to earn origin crystals. Secondly, they could learn from others and improve their sword skills. Why not? Sword duel. Chu Mu smiled slightly and did not say anything. He continued to immerse himself in cultivation. If he had time, he would not mind learning from others. The cultivation of the infinite desolate sword origin, the cultivation of the pupils of sword, the cultivation of the heaven-seizing technique, the comprehension of the undying sword intent, the thought research and perfection of sword skills, and so on almost used up all of Chu Mu's time. Feeling that the first half of the pupils of sword was about to be completed, Chu Mu forgot about everything and immersed himself in seclusion. In the middle deck of the airship, the sword duel had already begun on the arena. On the sword battle arena, two swordsmen were facing off against each other. Around them, the tables and chairs on the upper, middle and lower levels were almost filled with people. They were drinking wine and enjoying food while watching the battle of swords. It was a very relaxing scene. At the top corner of the cafeteria, some of the crew members of this flying ship were also seated. The leader was a young man who was holding a crystal-clear wine cup as he watched the two parties fighting on the arena. "Young master, this Li Jiwen's swordsmanship is not bad. He should be able to defeat his opponent and win the 100-win streak," a skinny middle-aged man beside the young man said. He always had a sullen face and looked very serious. "What about that Chu Mu?" the young man asked. "Young master, that Chu Mu seems to be cultivating in seclusion. It's been more than 2 months since I boarded the flying ship, and I've actually been cultivating all this time." The young man couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Other people who worked hard to cultivate had appeared at least 2 or 3 times in the past 2 months. This Chu Mu comes from a humble background. For him to be able to reach this stage, it's inseparable from his hard work. They had done some research on every genius that caught their eye. Although it was limited to this flying ship, they were still able to obtain some information that could be sorted out and analyzed. It was close to the truth. Chu Mu was one of the geniuses that they valued the most. Naturally, they would pay more attention to him. In the room, Chu Mu sat cross-legged on a cattail hassock, motionless. He had been in this position for many days, as if he had become a statue. In his spiritual world, the vast and pure spiritual power was undergoing changes. The cultivation of the first half of the pupils of sword secret technique was to refine the spiritual power and finally form a form that was suitable for the pupils of sword secret technique. Since Chu Mu obtained this secret technique, he had been cultivating it almost every day. It gradually became more and more profound. Today, he was finally about to cultivate the first half. Gradually, the spiritual power in his spiritual world continued to condense and compress, vaguely forming the outline of a sword. With Chu Mu's cultivation, the spiritual power was compressed and condensed again and again. Finally, a sword was formed. It was a sword of spiritual power, a sign that Chu Mu had cultivated the first half of the pupils of sword secret technique. Once the sword of spiritual power was formed, Chu Mu didn't immediately end his cultivation. Instead, he continued to cultivate the first half of the pupils of sword secret technique, making the newly formed sword of spiritual power more rounded and condensed. He wasn't in a hurry to cultivate the second half. After cultivating for another half an hour, Chu Mu stopped cultivating and opened his eyes. Two sword of spiritual power broke through the air, making a popping sound as if it had pierced through the sky. He tried to spread out the spiritual power. The range of coverage didn't change, but he felt that it was easier to control. Everything within the range of coverage was also clearer. Cultivation required a balance between work and rest. Since he had cultivated the first half of the pupils of sword secret technique, Chu Mu planned to go outside and take a look. Wasn't there going to be a sword duel? It would be good to broaden his horizons. He got up and went to the cafeteria. At first glance, there were many people. In the arena, there were 2 people fighting back and forth. Sword light flickered, and it was very unusual. Chu Mu casually found an empty seat and sat down. He took out the 10,000 beasts' blood and supreme dragon blood jade cup, poured himself a cup, and enjoyed the wine while watching the battle. After a while, a young man came over with a cup of wine. He had a smile on his face and was very easygoing, as if he was at home. He sat down in the empty seat next to Chu Mu. This brother's wine cup is very unusual. The young man smiled and started a conversation. The wine is good too. Can you give me a cup? With that, the young man drank the wine in the cup in one gulp and took out a very unusual-looking wine cup and placed it on the table. He acted as if he was familiar with him and wasn't polite at all. Chu Mu naturally wouldn't be stingy and poured a cup for the young man. This young man looked very unfamiliar, but Chu Mu didn't care. After all, there were tens of thousands of people on this flying ship, and he had only seen a few of them. Good wine. This is brewed with the blood of ancient fierce beasts, right? It's really good wine and it's strong enough. The young man took a sip and his face was a little red. He couldn't help but say. He drank the rest of the wine in one gulp, put down the empty cup, and pushed it to Chu Mu. Chu Mu couldn't help but smile and pour him another cup. The way men closed the distance between each other was actually very simple. Good wine and beautiful women. My name is Tian Xiaoyu. After chatting for a while, the young man introduced himself. If Chu Mu deliberately paid attention, he would definitely discover that the young man was the one who had transmitted his voice to every room when everyone had just boarded the flying ship more than 2 months ago. It was just that Chu Mu didn't care at that time and cultivated in seclusion for more than 2 months, so he didn't recognize him. My name is Chu Mu. Chu Mu said. He still didn't know that the young man sitting in front of him was the owner of this flying ship and also the young master of the Tian Xiaoyu clan in West Tiger City. Of course, even if he knew, Chu Mu would only be a little surprised. Brother Chu, why don't you go and try? If you win 100 consecutive victories, you will be rewarded with 10,000 high-grade origin crystals, Tian Xiaoyu said and pointed at the battle arena. He knew that Chu Mu came from a humble background and came from the Zelene continent, a small region of the human race. He was just a disciple of a small force. To be able to reach this step, he must have put in a lot of effort. It was hard to imagine that 10,000 high-grade origin crystals should be very attractive to him. I will. Chu Mu took a glance and nodded with a smile. However, if he went up, he wouldn't go for the 10,000 high-grade origin crystals, but for the last 100,000 high-grade origin crystals. In addition, he also wanted to fight against other sword experts and improve his swordsmanship during the battle. Brother Tian Xiaoyu, why don't you go up and try? Chu Mu asked. I'll pass. I know my own situation. Tian Xiaoyu shook his head and said. At this moment, the outcome of the battle arena had been decided. Li Jiwen finally defeated the last opponent and successfully won 100 consecutive victories. He immediately received a reward of 10,000 high-grade origin crystals. Brother Chu, why don't you go and try? Tian Xiaoyu said. Okay. Chu Mu nodded and jumped and landed on the battle arena. Who is that person? I recognize him. He is one of the 4 great geniuses, Chu Mu. So it's him. I haven't seen him for more than 2 months, and he only appeared now. He can definitely win 100 consecutive victories. That's not necessarily true. The level of swordsmanship is not directly related to the level of sword intent quintessence refinement. Indeed, some people with brilliant swordsmanship didn't have a high level of sword intent quintessence refinement. For example, in the past 2 months, among those who had won 100 consecutive victories, there were several whose sword intent quintessence had not even reached the 8th rank. After Xikong Zhan and the others heard this, they all smiled but didn't say anything. Chu Mu couldn't win 100 consecutive victories? Was this a joke? Although their swordsmanship couldn't win 100 consecutive victories, they had personally sparred with Chu Mu and watched Chu Mu sparring with Sword of Gojoseon many times. They already knew that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was very profound. Coupled with the recent battles, those swordsmen who had won 100 consecutive victories were simply inferior to Chu Mu. What they were thinking about was whether Chu Mu could obtain first place in the 100-win competition and obtain the 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals. To them, this was a huge sum. Standing on the battle arena, countless gazes fell on Chu Mu. "Please advise." A genius landed on the battle arena and drew his sword as he spoke to Chu Mu. Soon after, he drew his sword and stabbed at Chu Mu. As expected of a genius, no matter what, his swordsmanship wouldn't be too bad. In an instant, Chu Mu passed by the other party. After the other party rushed a few steps, he suddenly bent down and held his stomach. It was very painful. In that instant, not only did Chu Mu dodge his sword, he even used the sword tip to strike his abdomen. His entire body was powerless. So easily, Chu Mu defeated a person. Let me. In any case, this was a battle where no one would die. Even if they were injured, it would only be minor injuries. They could still spar and exchange swordsmanship, so there was nothing to be afraid of. One after another, they were defeated by Chu Mu's sword. One after another, they came up to fight with Chu Mu. They were all fearless. 10 consecutive victories, 20 consecutive victories, 30 consecutive victories, 40 consecutive victories. Although these swordsmen's swordsmanship wasn't bad, most of them weren't even qualified to make Chu Mu draw his sword. Chapter 9:11. The 100th person was defeated by Chu Mu's sword. 100 consecutive victories. That's amazing. He looks so relaxed. Chu Mu's swordsmanship is very powerful. Some don't even need to unsheathe their swords. Some defeat their opponents in one strike. What terrifying swordsmanship! 100 consecutive victories. Chu Mu jumped down from the arena. Immediately, someone gave him 10,000 upper-grade yuan jing. Chu Mu didn't stand on ceremony and accepted them all. Brother Chu's swordsmanship is really powerful and unfathomable. Tian Xiaoyu smiled. Powerful people could often tell the level of a person's strength from some fragment. In 100 sword battles, some Chu Mu didn't even need to unsheath his swords. Some of them were unsheathed, but they defeated their opponents in one strike. Were Chu Mu's opponents too weak? No, some swordsmanship was indeed ordinary, but some were still very powerful. It was just that Chu Mu was too strong, which made them seem relatively weak. Hearing Tian Xiaoyu's words, Chu Mu just smiled slightly. He was looking forward to fighting with those swordsmen who had won 100 consecutive victories. Sometimes, a sword battle would be very fast, and the outcome would be decided in just 3 breaths. This was because the difference between the two swordsmen's attainments in swordsmanship was too great. But sometimes, when the two swordsmen's level of swordsmanship was about the same, they would fight for a long time. Half an hour or even 2 hours was possible. After watching for a while, Chu Mu stood up. "Brother Tianxiao, I plan to go back and rest. Goodbye." Chu Mu said to Tian Xiaoyu. "Brother Chu, take care. Don't forget the battle for the first place." Tian Xiaoyu smiled and stood up to see Chu Mu off. After Chu Mu left, Tian Xiaoyu also walked through the crowd and returned to his seat. "This Chu Mu is not bad. He's worth making friends with." Tian Xiaoyu seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be talking to the people next to her. As the young master of a large family, he had received all kinds of training since he was young. He was outstanding in all aspects and was not a playboy. Therefore, he had a good eye for people. Through his short contact with Chu Mu, he found that Chu Mu was a man of few words and would not take the initiative to find a topic to talk about. However, he was not arrogant. In this aspect, he was completely different from those geniuses who were very talented but were full of arrogance. After returning to his room, Chu Mu cast aside all distracting thoughts and took out the undying sword to comprehend the undying sword, intent on it. More and more cracks appeared on the undying sword. When Chu Mu had first obtained it, it had been in perfect condition. At the very least, it looked completely undamaged. After killing the underworld god race's underworld king, it had consumed half of the undying sword intent. Cracks had begun to appear on the undying sword. Now, as Chu Mu continued to comprehend it, the undying sword intent was consumed bit by bit. The cracks on the sword also increased. When the undying sword intent in the sword was completely consumed, the sword would also shatter. Chu Mu only hoped that he could comprehend the undying sword intent before it was completely consumed. Although it was very difficult, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, Chu Mu would work hard to do it. Every day, Chu Mu cultivated. He wasn't in a rush to cultivate the second half of sword pupil. Instead, he consolidated the first half and made his divine remembrance sword even more condensed. He continuously polished it and made it even more perfect. As for the sword embryo, due to the lack of nutrients, it hadn't grown much. Chu Mu wasn't in a rush on this point. He would wait for a chance in the future to use his sword to kill and train the slaughtering divine weapon. For now, the non-return sword was enough. Time passed unknowingly as he cultivated. Unknowingly, a lot of time had passed. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and a voice sounded, "Sir Chu Mu, the sword competition of 100 consecutive victories is about to begin." This was a hint. It was up to him whether he wanted to go or not. Chu Mu had just finished cultivating. He got up and went to the cafeteria. Everyone was gathered here. The sword competition of 100 consecutive victories would definitely be more exciting than the previous competition. No one wanted to miss it. The format of the competition was the same as before. There was still no change. One person would go up to the arena first to accept challenges. As long as they kept winning, they would be able to get first place. This was because the sword competition consumed physical strength. Sometimes, after a big battle, one's physical strength would be almost depleted. In the next battle, one would not be able to use their full strength. Therefore, the format of the competition was slightly adjusted. The two arena masters would fight each other. For example, Arena Master number 1 would go down to rest after a battle. Arena Master number 2 would go up and rest after the battle. It would be Arena Master number 1's turn. Whoever defeated the Arena Master would replace him as the new Arena Master until the end. The final battle would naturally be between Arena Master number 1 and Arena Master number 2. Some people might say that the one who went up first would have no advantage. The one who went up later would be able to watch the battle and gain experience. It would be more advantageous for the one who went up later. That was not wrong. However, for a real expert, even if his sword path was seen through, he would still win. Including Chu Mu, there were a total of 40 people participating in the competition. In other words, during this period, a total of 40 people would win 100 consecutive victories. They would compete for the first place. Chu Mu glanced over and found Xiahou Shan, Dragon Venerable, and Jiang Kaidai among them. There were also some people he had not seen before. However, since they could win 100 consecutive victories, it meant that their sword skills were extraordinary. At this time, Tianxiao came over with a smile on his face. He was accompanied by several experts of the sword of Gojoseon on his left and right. Seeing Chu Mu, Tianxiao nodded and greeted him with a smile. Chu Mu suddenly realized that Tianxiao was one of the people on this flying ship. He might be the owner of this flying ship. Chu Mu didn't mind that Tianxiao didn't tell him his true identity. After all, he didn't ask. Besides, to make friends with someone, one shouldn't look at their identity. One should put everything aside and look at their character. Chu Mu had a good impression of Tianxiao. "You are all geniuses, real elites," Tianxiao said. Tianxiao said. His tone and attitude made people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. They couldn't feel any ill will towards him. The sword duel is just a platform for everyone to interact with each other. I won't say much. I believe that everyone can't wait to make friends with the sword. I wonder which two geniuses want to be the arena master? Tian Xiaoyu paused and continued, glancing at the crowd. Those who could win 100 consecutive victories were all geniuses. Even if they didn't show any arrogance, they were still proud. There was no lack of people who liked to fight. Someone immediately stood up and wanted to be the arena master. At least being challenged felt better than challenging others. Everyone sat down and watched the first battle. Please. Please. Both sides cupped their hands and looked at each other. Their eyes flickered as they slowly pulled out their swords and moved in small steps, looking for the best time to attack. It was fine if they didn't attack, but once they attacked, they must defeat their opponent. Both of them had the same idea. Therefore, for a while, no one attacked. It couldn't be helped. After all, their swordsmanship was similar. In this world, there were countless people who practiced swordsmanship, but not countless swordsmanship styles. After practicing for a long time, it was inevitable that some similar or even the same style would appear. Why haven't they started yet? Some swordsmen who were weaker in swordsmanship were impatient. They looked around and saw the two people staring at each other, constantly moving their feet. It was very boring. However, those who were skilled in swordsmanship could feel that they were in the same situation. They could think about how to break it if they were in the same situation. It was very interesting to watch. In Chu Mu's eyes, these two people's swordsmanship was quite good. They had few flaws, but it was still not enough for him. After going around and around, they finally found a trace of opportunity. In an instant, both of them attacked almost at the same time. It was as if thunder exploded and lightning filled the sky. In an instant, two sharp sword light intersected in midair and crossed each other. The sound of swords colliding was ear-piercing and sparks flew. As their figures crossed each other, the two quickly turned around and attacked again. Since they had already attacked and couldn't defeat their opponent with one sword, they would use a thunderous attack to break down their opponent's attack and defense. The two swords collided from time to time. The sound of the collision tore through the sky and pierced everyone's eardrums. However, it was very exciting. Some people couldn't help but stand up when they saw the subtleties. Brother Chu, who do you think will win? Tianqia sat next to Chu Mu and asked. Some people also turned around to look. Xiahou Shan and Long Zun frowned. Previously, they sent people to contact Chu Mu and invited him to join them. They promised him all kinds of benefits but were rejected. This made them feel unhappy. Now that they saw Tianqia sitting next to Chu Mu and speaking as if they were old friends, they felt even more unhappy. They felt that Chu Mu definitely looked down on them and their families. Although this was human nature, as a swordsman who had refined both sword intent and profound to rank 8, he was a highly valued genius no matter where he went. It could be said that he was very arrogant. The arena lord, Chu Mu said after looking at them a few more times. I don't think so. Long Zun sneered and retorted. I think it will be the challenger. Xiahou Shan surprisingly agreed. He was clearly targeting Chu Mu. When Chu Mu heard this, he didn't refute. The truth would be revealed soon. Why don't we make a bet? Let's use 10,000 upper-grade primal crystals as the wager. Long Zun looked at Chu Mu and said with a provocative sneer. I will also bet. Xiahou Shan smiled and looked at Chu Mu. How about this? If you lose, you only need to take out 10,000 upper-grade primal crystals. I believe you can afford it. If you win, we will each give you 10,000 upper-grade primal crystals. How about it? How can I refuse someone who wants to give me primal crystals? Chu Mu smiled and said. How about this? I will also bet 10,000 upper-grade primal crystals. It will belong to whoever wins. Tianqia smiled and said. The attention of the people by the side was immediately drawn. The moment he opened his mouth, it was a wager of 10,000 high-grade essence crystals. This kind of extravagance was not small. However, they did not dare to participate. Firstly, 10,000 upper-grade primal crystals was a lot. Secondly, Both sides of the bet were experts who had refined their sword intent to the limit of rank 8. Moreover, the other side was a member of a large family in West Tiger Great Region. They did not dare to offend them. Chapter 9:12. The bets had been placed. At this time, the battle on the battle arena had reached the most critical point. The outcome was about to be decided. Xiahou Shan and Longzuan were both calm. Originally, they didn't like each other, but this time, they were united against a common enemy. They both targeted Chu Mu. They believed that they would definitely win because the arena master seemed to be at a disadvantage in the battle arena. Brother Chu, the arena lord's situation. Although Tianqia came from an extraordinary background, his swordsmanship attainments were far from Chu Mu's. Therefore, he also thought that the arena lord was showing signs of weakness and would be defeated. Brother Tianqia, don't worry. Chu Mu looked indifferent. Tianqia smiled slightly and didn't say anything. 10,000 high-grade yuan jing was nothing to him. The arena lord was gradually showing signs of weakness, while the challenger's sword was becoming fiercer and fiercer. It was like endless thunder across the sky. Everyone thought that Chu Mu was going to lose. They even looked at his face. However, they found that Chu Mu's expression didn't change. He was still as indifferent as before. There was even a faint trace of confidence. Deliberately mystifying. Xiahou Shan snorted coldly. At this moment, the arena lord revealed a flaw. The challenger seized the opportunity and sped up his attacks. Who knew that the arena lord had purposely revealed a flaw? The challenger's frenzied attacks were equivalent to abandoning all defense. It was exactly what the arena lord wanted. The arena lord dodged and immediately counterattacked. The fierce attacks immediately caught the challenger off guard. The challenger's sword was split apart and the arena lord's sword was placed on his neck. If it was a battle of life and death, his head would have been cut off. The challenger was also very straightforward. A loss was a loss. There was nothing to be unsatisfied about. He cupped his hands, put away his sword, turned around, and jumped off the battle arena. Xiahou Shan and Longzuan were like ducks that had been grabbed by the throat. Their mouths were agape. The smiles on their faces were turning into astonishment. They were caught off guard. Brother Chu not only has profound swordsmanship, but his eyesight is also outstanding. Tianqia clapped and smiled. Since he had decided to befriend Chu Mu, he naturally stood on Chu Mu's side. Immediately, someone sent over 10,000 high-grade essence crystals. Chu Mu accepted them without any trace of politeness. Xiahou Shan and Longzuan naturally wouldn't lose face for the sake of 10,000 high-grade origin crystals. They also took out 10,000 high-grade origin crystals and gave it to Chu Mu. In a twinkle, Chu Mu obtained 30,000 pieces of high-grade essence crystals. One had to know that most of his upper-grade metacrystals came from the space ring of the Burning Blood Sword of Gojoseon back in the Crimson Wasteland. There was a total of 30,000 pieces, and he gave a portion to Qin Shanha. After that, he obtained very few upper-grade metacrystals from killing strong enemies. Including the ratio of mid-grade metacrystals to low-grade metacrystals, he only had about 20,000 upper-grade metacrystals. He did not expect that in a short few days' time, he earned 40,000 pieces of high-grade essence crystals. Arena Champion number 11 and stepped off the stage to rest. He had used up a lot of energy in that battle. Next, it was Arena Champion number 2's turn to accept the challenge. The second champion was Li Jiwen. His eyes shone brightly and he was in high spirits. "Who will fight with me?" Li Jiwen looked around and said coldly. He was very confident in his swordsmanship. "Let me." Immediately, someone stepped onto the stage. "Take my sword," Li Jiwen said coldly. He unsheathed his sword, and it turned into a violent storm, attacking the 9 states at night. His opponent was able to obtain 100 consecutive victories, so his swordsmanship was not ordinary. However, compared to Li Jiwen, it was not enough. In less than 15 minutes, he was defeated by Li Jiwen's sword. Not bad swordsmanship, Chu Mu said secretly. The competition continued. Compared to ordinary people, the bodies of divine condensation tier swordsmen were much stronger in all aspects. After their energy was used up, their recovery was also many times faster. Basically, as long as they did not overuse their energy, they could completely recover in a short 15-minute. It was Arena Champion No. 1's turn. This time, Arena Champion No. 1 was defeated and replaced. One battle after another continued. The competition went on for about 10 battles. 4 Arena Champions No. 1 had changed, but Arena Champion No. 2 had always been Li Jiwen. He had always defeated his opponent. His swordsmanship was so profound that it made people have a whole new level of respect for him. Even Tian Xiaoyu had the thought of recruiting him. For this battle, I will go up and get some exercise. Xiahou Shan suddenly stood up and strode towards the arena. He wanted to challenge Li Jiwen. Seeing Xiahou Shan, Li Jiwen was also shocked. He immediately calmed down. Xiahou Shan's sword intent had been refined to the limit of the 8th revolution. He was indeed a rare genius. In terms of strength, Li Jiwen was far from being his opponent. However, they were competing in pure swordsmanship. He was not afraid of anyone. Make your move. Xiahou Shan was even more confident in himself. Take my sword. Li Jiwen stared at Xiahou Shan. His sharp sword was unsheathed. Sword light spilled out in a violent storm. Xiahou Shan did not move. He stared coldly at the sword light that came like a flash flood. His figure was also drowned by the sword light. Li Jiwen's heart suddenly jumped. He did not feel like he had stabbed anyone. A blinding light appeared in front of him, accompanied by a heavy aura. It was so powerful that he could only forcefully withdraw his sword to block it. He was sent flying by Xiahou Shan's sword. Xiahou Shan took a step forward. His powerful strength trampled on the ground. He was very fast. He charged like an immemorial beast and appeared in front of Li Jiwen. He raised his sword and slashed down again. It was like a mountain crushing down. Xiahou Shan was tall and muscular. He was very strong. Although he was not very fast, his every move would affect the surrounding air, forming a powerful pressure. After losing the initiative, Li Jiwen was under Xiahou Shan's attack. He was defeated by Xiahou Shan in the end. When he stepped off the stage, Xiahou Shan deliberately looked at Chu Mu. He raised his eyebrows. It was a provocation. Arena Master No. 1 stepped onto the stage. Revered Dragon stood up. He first glanced at Chu Mu. Then, he laughed as he walked. I'll try too. Landing on the arena, Arena Lord No. 1 immediately took 2 steps back. His aura had weakened significantly. The revered dragon was laughing maniacally. He looked extremely arrogant and his aura was overflowing. His physique wasn't as strong as Xiahou Shan's, but he gave off the feeling of explosive power. It was as if every muscle on his body was like a volcano. Whether it was Xiahou Shan or revered dragon, their bodies were different from ordinary divine condensation realm swordsmen. It was either their bloodline or they had cultivated some kind of powerful body refining technique. Long Zun struck out with his sword. A terrifying power erupted from his not-so-strong body. With a boom, it was like a 1,000-year-old volcano erupting. With a single strike, he defeated his opponent and replaced him. Actually, if his opponent had calmed down, he could have fought Revered Dragon for a while. Unfortunately, Revered Dragon carried a tyrannical aura as soon as he stepped onto the stage. He was also a peerless genius whose sword intent had been refined to the limit of the 8th revolution. His opponent was a little weak against him. Without enough aura, how could he fully unleash the power of his sword arts? Moreover, he had lost the initiative. It was not strange that he was defeated in one sword strike. When Revered Dragon stepped off the stage, he also provoked Chu Mu. Hee, it's my turn. Xiahou Shan strode onto the arena. He and Revered Dragon had fought many times. They were basically tied. Usually they disliked each other. But today they had a common enemy, and that was Chu Mu. Chu Mu, to be able to stand on par with us and obtain 100 consecutive victories, your sword arts should be pretty good. Come up and play. Xiahou Shan pointed his sword and scabbard at Chu Mu. This was a strong way to provoke his opponent. Coupled with his words, the provocation was even more obvious. Chu Mu was also angry. Such a strong provocation made him raise his eyelids. His eyes shone with a sharp light. He stood up and walked towards the arena step by step. Everyone's gaze, whether intentionally or not, was focused on Chu Mu. It was as if the moment Chu Mu appeared, he became the center of attention. An indescribable and unique aura spread out from Chu Mu, silently covering the entire area. This was the bearing of an expert. Facing Xiahou Shan's repeated provocations, Chu Mu did not plan to keep a low profile. He wanted Xiahou Shan to understand the consequences of provoking him. With a light tap, his body leaped into the air and landed on the arena. Unsheathe your sword. Let me see what you're capable of. The more outstanding Chu Mu's performance was, the more displeased Xiahou Shan was. There was no reason for it. In short, he was displeased. Take this. Since Xiahou Shan wanted to do so, Chu Mu did not hold back. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Mu's body seemed to leave the ground and soared into the sky like a swallow. His right hand grabbed the sword hilt and instantly unsheathed it. It cut through the air, drawing a perfect arc as it slashed towards Xiahou Shan. The moment an expert made a move, one would know whether or not he was a real expert. Seeing Chu Mu's sword move so smoothly and fluently that there were no signs before it was launched, Xiahou Shan was startled. Long Zun, Jiang Kaidai, and the others were also shocked. Clearly, Chu Mu's sword arts were beyond their expectations. Xiahou Shan did not dare to underestimate him anymore. He quickly retreated and unsheathed his sword. A huge sword light seemed to split the arena apart as it slashed towards Chu Mu. The sword light collided and shattered, turning into countless sparks that sputtered in all directions like fireworks. Swish, swish, swish. Chu Mu attacked from 3 different directions, catching Xiahou Shan a little off guard. Xiahou Shan had rich battle experience, and his attainments in sword arts were not to be underestimated. He immediately adjusted himself and slashed his sword to deal with Chu Mu's changes. After exchanging a few moves, Chu Mu could see that Xiahou Shan was worthy of being called the #1 genius of the younger generation of a big clan. Xiahou Shan's sword arts domain had actually reached the peak of the 7th level. Vertically, he had also reached the peak of the physical realm. He was just 1 step away from entering the physical realm. Even so, the difference between him and Chu Mu's peak of the 10th level was obvious. Vertically, the peak of the physical realm was perhaps 1 step away from the physical realm. It was more difficult to break through compared to the sword arts domain. When the two were combined, the difference in sword arts was even more obvious. After testing out Xiahou Shan's sword arts attainments, Chu Mu displayed even more strength. As the sword light danced, Xiahou Shan was suppressed. Even though Xiahou Shan's strength was much stronger than Chu Mu's, it was useless. Strength could defeat 10, but when one's technique reached a certain level, it could counter the opponent's strength. Under Chu Mu's sword, Xiahou Shan was unable to withstand it. He hastily resisted and was ultimately defeated. Chapter 9:13. Chu Mu's sword was resting on Xiahou Shan's neck. Xiahou Shan's protective sword aura was very weak. With the sharpness of the sword of no return, as long as Chu Mu exerted some force, he would be able to cut off Xiahou Shan's neck. Xiahou Shan's life was in Chu Mu's hands. Seeing Chu Mu's calm face, Xiahou Shan felt a little apprehensive. He was afraid that Chu Mu would really kill him. Once they entered the West Tiger domain, the Xiahou clan's influence wouldn't be as great. Even if he could take revenge on Chu Mu, he wouldn't know if he killed Chu Mu. You are too weak, Chu Mu said indifferently and withdrew his sword. Xiahou Shan's expression suddenly changed, turning green, red, and white. It was very unsightly. After defeating Xiahou Shan, Chu Mu became the second arena champion. He went down to rest. It was Longzuan's turn to go up. After seeing Chu Mu's sword skills, Longzuan took it very seriously. He didn't provoke Chu Mu like before. He only glanced at Chu Mu. He was very clear about Chu Mu's strength and sword skills. They had fought many times. In terms of sword skills, Xiahou Shan was suppressed and defeated by Chu Mu. Longzuan estimated that he didn't have much confidence in defeating Chu Mu. Jiang Katie's beautiful eyes blinked. They were filled with curiosity as they fell on Chu Mu's face. It was as if she wanted to see through Chu Mu. She was very curious about how a person with such a humble background, without the resources and environment of a big clan, could cultivate his sword skills to such a level. There were indeed geniuses and self-taught geniuses. However, without guidance there would always be a gap, especially when both geniuses were geniuses. One came from a humble background, with ordinary cultivation resources and environment, while the other came from a noble background, with countless cultivation resources and an excellent environment. They never lacked the guidance of experts. The development of the two was completely predictable. The other geniuses were also very curious. In terms of background, each of them was much better than Chu Mu, but none of them had the same sword skills as Chu Mu. Brother Chu's swordsmanship is really... Tianqia clapped his hands as if he couldn't find the right words to describe it. His face was full of admiration from the bottom of his heart. The other sword of Gojoseon beside Tianqia were also surprised from the bottom of their hearts. It was also the first time they had seen someone among the younger generation whose swordsmanship had reached such a level. They couldn't help but think more highly of Chu Mu. Chu Mu only smiled and didn't say anything. On the battle arena, the battle between Long Zun and the challenger was somewhat intense. Each of Long Zun's sword was filled with powerful explosive power, bringing an incomparable visual impact. His opponent was vexed. At the beginning, he could still contend with Long Zun for a while, but after a quarter of an hour, the explosive power of Long Zun's sword didn't weaken. Instead, it seemed to have become stronger. There was no other way. Although Long Zun's strength wasn't strong, his explosive power was strong and his speed was fast enough. It was very difficult to dodge. In the end, the challenger was defeated under Long Zun's sword. The sword in his hand was sent flying. Long Zun came down and Chu Mu came up. Both sides brushed past each other. "Let's leave our battle for the last," Long Zun said in a low voice. Chu Mu didn't say anything. If it was the last battle, then they had to make sure that they could reach the end first. Chu Mu's opponent was defeated under Chu Mu's sword in just 2 or 3 moves. This made the crowd even more clear how obvious the gap between the 100 consecutive victories was. The battle continued one after another. For the sake of exchanging pointers, for the sake of the last 100,000 high-grade yuan crystals, the battles continued. Soon, an exciting battle was about to unfold. Why would it be exciting? Because the two opponents were 2 of the 4 great geniuses, Long Zun and Jiang Kaidai. Jiang Kaidai was a little different from Long Zun and Xiahou Shan. Firstly, she was a woman. Secondly, she was more low-profile. She didn't speak much and wasn't as arrogant. But there was no denying that Jiang Kaidai was the #1 genius of the Jiang clan's younger generation. She was a peerless genius who had tempered her sword intent and profundity to the limits of the 8th revolution. She wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Long Zun and the others. The previous battle between Chu Mu and Xiahou Shan had been very exciting. They naturally hoped that this battle would be even more exciting. Jiang Katie's body fluttered like a butterfly as she landed on the arena. Her figure was beautiful, and when paired with her colorful clothes, she truly resembled a fluttering butterfly, dazzling the eyes of the spectators. Jiang Katie's sword seemed to be multicolored. When it was unsheathed, it would release a 7-colored light that reflected in all directions. It would affect one's vision. He felt that Jiang Kaidi's swordsmanship should be light and graceful. Fight! With a thunderous shout, Long Zun's power erupted. His sword was like a tsunami, capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas. Jiang Kaidai flew backwards like a weak kite. Her graceful figure fluttered in the air like a fluttering butterfly. She was like a fluttering butterfly. Amidst her fragility, there was a trace of absolute strength within her strength. She was like a weak kite that flew backwards against the wind. Her sword moved along with her. It shuttled through the tsunami-like air pressure and naturally drifted to Long Zun's side. Her sword swept past Long Zun's neck like the wings of a butterfly. Long Zun's expression changed slightly. He staggered to avoid Jiang Kaidi's sword. With a spin of his sword, he could sweep through an army. His momentum was so great that even an army of thousands would be defeated by him. But Jiang Kaidi's body was like a feather, weightless. She fluttered along with the air current. No matter how powerful Long Zun's sword was, it couldn't hit her. This was the most depressing thing. He clearly had terrifying explosive power. Even if it was a mountain, he was confident that he could shatter it. However, he had encountered an opponent that he couldn't focus on. With nowhere to focus his power, he naturally couldn't release his power. For a moment, Jiang Kaidai couldn't get close to Long Zun. The explosive power of Long Zun's sword was too tyrannical. Two completely different styles of swordsmanship clashed again and again in front of everyone's eyes on the arena. Their swords hadn't even clashed once, but the danger involved made everyone unable to take their eyes off them. They even forgot to breathe. Chu Mu also kept his eyes on them. Although their attainments in sword arts were inferior to his, they still had their merits and were worth learning. As they fought, Jiang Kaidi's figure suddenly changed. She swooped down like a butterfly with a trace of determination. She waved her rainbow-winged sword repeatedly. The air currents around her were affected and changed. Vaguely, the air currents mixed with her figure and seemed to form the outline of a rainbow butterfly. Half-step form. Chu Mu was startled at first. Then, he whispered, Jiang Kaidai won. In terms of swordsmanship, Jiang Kaidai was about the same as Long Zun. However, in terms of the depth of her swordsmanship, Jiang Kaidai was one step ahead of him. She had already taken half a step into the formless realm. Her sword strike was flexible to the extreme as it broke through Long Zun's layers of energy and defeated him. The situation took a sudden turn for the worse. Victory and defeat were decided in an instant. The revered dragon was stunned, and many people were unable to react for a moment. So it's half-step form. No wonder she could win. Tian Xiaoyu and the others nodded. The next battle should be between the two arena champions. I wonder who will get first place in the end. Will it be Chu Mu or Jiang Kaidai? I think it will be Jiang Kaidai. Beautiful women were always more popular. The final battle didn't start so quickly. Jiang Kaidai left the stage to rest. She sat not far from Chu Mu. From time to time, she would glance at Chu Mu, making many people jealous. Brother Chu, you have such luck with women, Tian Xiaoyu teased. Chu Mu only smiled when he heard this. A quarter of an hour later, Jiang Kaidai stood up. She glanced at Chu Mu, left him with a graceful back view, and leaped onto the stage. Go, Brother Chu. Don't let the beauty wait for too long, Tian Xiaoyu said with a mischievous smile. Chu Mu shook his head, stood up, and walked to the stage. He stood in front of Jiang Kaidai. I'm very curious about you. Jiang Kaidai stared at Chu Mu with her beautiful eyes and said straightforwardly. Her voice was a little ethereal, like a butterfly fluttering in a secluded valley. It was very pleasant to hear. How did you train? Diligently cultivating. Chu Mu wouldn't tell her everything just because she was a beauty. In fact, he only admired Jiang Kaidi's beauty. He wasn't bewitched. Chu Mu's answer was obviously not what Jiang Kaidai wanted. Therefore, she pursed her lips to express her dissatisfaction. Can you defeat me? Jiang Kaidai asked again. You'll know after you try. Chu Mu still answered casually. Jiang Kaidai was a little angry. One had to admit that even if a beauty was angry, she still had a special feeling. She unsheathed the rainbow wing sword and flew towards Chu Mu like a colorful butterfly. Jiang Kaidai used all of her sword arts as soon as she attacked. Chu Mu didn't use his full strength because he was watching from the sidelines. Instead, he used sword arts that were at the same level as Jiang Kaidai's. He wanted to personally experience her sword arts, comprehend the profundities in them, and then dissect them and absorb them for his own use. Jiang Kaidai also noticed this. However, she wanted to learn from Chu Mu's sword arts and improve herself. Chu Mu's style was different from others. He was tolerant of everything. His essence was very pure. It was pure sword art. Stabs, slashes, and other basic sword arts. All other styles were just supplementary and adaptable. Jiang Kaidai didn't learn much from Chu Mu's sword arts, which made her very depressed. After a quarter of an hour, Chu Mu had figured out the variations of Jiang Kaidai's sword arts. It was time to end the battle. In an instant, Chu Mu slashed out with his sword, using the shape of his sword arts. The shape of his sword arts wasn't any special shape. It was just a simple slash. The momentum of the slash was so fierce that it seemed to be able to cut the space of the primeval world. This kind of shape directly pointed to the essence of the slash. Jiang Kaidai was shocked, and so were the others. Although Tianqia's sword arts were far inferior to Chu Mu's, he was experienced and knowledgeable. His eyesight was better than many sword of Gojoseon. Therefore, he was very surprised. The other sword of Gojoseon behind him were also shocked from the bottom of their hearts. The gap between their sword arts was too obvious. Jiang Kaidai couldn't resist at all. She could only be defeated by Chu Mu's sword. At this point, Chu Mu won the first place in the 3-month sword art competition on the flying ship. His halo enveloped the geniuses on the flying ship, making them pale in comparison. Chapter 9:14. There was no doubt that Chu Mu had obtained 100,000 high-grade origin crystals. In addition to the 40,000 high-grade origin crystals he had obtained previously, he now had a total of 140,000 high-grade origin crystals. All of a sudden, his origin crystal wealth had multiplied by several times. Countless people envied Chu Mu, and some were even jealous of him. It couldn't be helped. Even Xiahou Shan, Long Zun, and Jiang Kaidai couldn't take out 140,000 high-grade origin crystals. Even for Tian Xiaoyu, it was still a considerable amount of wealth. Of course, this was nothing compared to the more than 40 million high-grade primordial crystals that the flying ship earned in one go. However, the flying ship was still a flying ship. Flying consumed a lot of energy. In addition to other things, more than 40 million high-grade primordial crystals did not fall into Tian Xiaoyu's hand. After the sword competition, Chu Mu became the person in the limelight. It was as if it was predestined that wherever he went, he would be in the limelight. His halo shrouded others, especially Dragon Sovereign and Xiahou Shan, who were 100% unhappy. They had all decided that they would find an opportunity in the future to show their full strength and teach Chu Mu a lesson. They would let him know that although a swordsman's sword skills were important, it wasn't everything. They believed that with their talent and background, their strength would definitely be stronger than Chu Mu. However, this was a matter for the future. After obtaining the wealth, Chu Mu returned to his room to cultivate. Every 10 days, he would come out to drink and chat with Tian Xiaoyu. Their friendship gradually deepened. It would take half a year to fly from the border town to the West Tiger City in the West Tiger Territory. However, the flying speed of this flying ship was 10 times the speed of sound. It could travel 24 hours a day without any pause. Just think about how vast the West Tiger Territory was. In West Tiger Territory, there were many places where powerful primordial fierce beasts lived. When the airship flew over a mountain range that was thousands of meters high and stretched for tens of thousands of miles, a group of iron-winged eagles suddenly attacked and broke the airship's protective seal. Fortunately, the sword of Gojosian guards on the airship acted in time and fought a fierce battle with the iron-winged eagles. In the end, more than half of the iron-winged eagles were killed, and the rest were repelled. Although no one died, dozens of Sword of Gojosian were injured. Some even lost an arm, greatly reducing their strength. Such a situation had long been expected, and all preparations had been made. Therefore, after the battle ended, there were people who immediately repaired the damaged parts of the flying ship. There were also sealing grandmasters who led several sealing grandmasters to repair the broken seals. It would cost a lot to hire a sealing grandmaster to oversee the operation. After the battle, Chu Mu stood on the deck and looked at the scenery outside through the invisible protective seal. There were countless shifting clouds, and below him were undulating mountain ranges. There were also lakes and lakes that shone with a myriad of colors. Not long ago, during the attack of the iron-winged eagles, the Sword of Gojosian had fought a life-and-death battle. A large number of corpses had fallen, and blood had dyed the flying ship red. Now it had been cleaned up, but Chu Mu could still smell a trace of blood. Chu Mu had seen that battle with his own eyes. However, he found that his strength was not enough to deal with it. Perhaps he could fight one or two iron-winged eagles, but the problem was that there were simply too many of them. There were thousands of them, and each iron-winged eagle was extremely powerful. Normal God Condensation Realm swordsmen were no match for them at all. There were even many iron-winged eagles that had reached the king level. Only king-level powerhouses could deal with them. Under such circumstances, ordinary king-level powerhouses would definitely die if they faced those iron-winged eagles alone. Hundreds of Sword of Gojosian had formed a sword formation on the flying ship, and only then had they killed more than half of the iron-winged eagles and forced the others to retreat. Chu Mu was also aware of his own weakness. His strength was still far from enough. However, the most important thing now was to break through and raise his cultivation to the peak of the divine condensation realm. At this moment, his eyes narrowed, and he revealed a look of shock as he looked at the clouds hundreds of meters away. The clouds were thick, but Chu Mu was still able to see a figure quickly traversing through the clouds. That speed was even slightly faster than the heaven-conquering flying ship. The flying ship's speed was 10 times the speed of sound. If that person's speed was slightly faster than the flying ship's, it meant that his speed was also 10 times the speed of sound. If he didn't hold back at all, then he was a king-level powerhouse. Moreover, he shouldn't be an ordinary king-level powerhouse. Hundreds of meters away, through the invisible barrier, Chu Mu could feel an extremely powerful sharpness emanating from that figure. It was as if it could tear apart the sky. That person's speed was extremely fast, and there were countless clouds. Chu Mu couldn't see his appearance clearly, but he remembered the person's figure and aura. That person seemed to sense that someone was looking at him. He turned his head, and Chu Mu immediately felt 2 divine swords shoot through the air. His eyes stung and his mental world roared. However, there was no hostility or killing intent. He quickly calmed down, which shocked Chu Mu. What kind of gaze was this? It was so shockingly sharp. Not long after, Chu Mu returned to his room and planned to cultivate. However, his mind was in turmoil, and he was unable to enter a state of cultivation. He decided not to cultivate for the time being, allowing his thoughts to wander. Unknowingly, his thoughts calmed down, and Chu Mu naturally entered a state of cultivation. Time flew by, and soon half a year was up. The outline of a huge city appeared in front of him. It stood majestically on the boundless land, like an ancient giant that had existed since time immemorial. This 1,000-meter-long flying ship was like a grain of sand in the ocean in front of this huge city. The flying ship flew into the sky above the huge city from the designated flight path and continued to go deeper. Then, it stopped above a huge mansion and slowly descended. Heroes, this is the West Tiger City in the West Tiger Territory. Everyone has arrived at their destination. In the middle of the flying ship, all the swordsmen were present, including Tian Xiaoyu. He looked around and said to everyone, "My Tian Xiao clan is one of the major clans in the West Tiger City. We are powerful and have abundant resources. We are thirsty for talents. I hope that all of you can integrate into my Tian Xiao clan. The Tian Xiao clan will also treat you as a clan member. If you perform well, you can even receive focused training." To put it bluntly, Tian Xiaoyu was recruiting everyone. Before this, he had sent people or personally contacted some geniuses. A portion of them had already agreed to join the Tian Xiao clan. This wouldn't prevent them from becoming disciples of the major clans when their mountain gates opened. A portion of them immediately expressed their willingness to stay and join the Tian Xiao clan, but most of them were unwilling. Tian Xiaoyu didn't urge them to stay. In fact, he also knew that it would be enough if a portion of the people he invited were willing to join the Tian Xiao clan. Even if all of these people really wanted to join the Tian Xiao clan, he wouldn't agree because the burden of tens of thousands of people was too great for the Tian Xiao clan. People like Long Zuan, Xiahou Shan, Jiang Kaidai, and the others had all left. They wouldn't join the Tian Xiao clan. They were proud and unyielding from the bottom of their hearts. Although the Tian Xiao clan was bigger than their clans, they thought that it was far from being comparable to the major clans. If they wanted cultivation resources, the ones they brought from their clans were enough for now. Even if they joined the Tian Xiao clan, they wouldn't be provided with too much. Moreover, joining the Tian Xiao clan also meant that they would be restricted. Chu Mu didn't leave because Tian Xiaoyu had invited him to stay as a guest in the Tian Xiao clan. Chu Mu had also indirectly mentioned that he could become friends, but joining the Tian Xiao clan was out of the question. After that, Tian Xiaoyu didn't mention it again. He had a firm attitude and became friends with Chu Mu as a friend. He sincerely invited Chu Mu to stay as a guest in the Tian Xiao clan. After all, after coming to the West Tiger City, he had to find a place to stay first before waiting for the major clans to open their gate. Chu Mu was unfamiliar with the place and had someone to guide him. Moreover, it was someone he could make friends with. As a friend, Chu Mu naturally wouldn't refuse. As for the geniuses that were successfully recruited by Tian Xiaoyu, Li Jiwen was also among them. Li Jiwen's sword intent and profound had been tempered to the middle stage of the 8th revolution, which was quite good. No matter where he was placed, he was at the level of a true genius. His sword skills were even better than many people who had tempered their sword intent and profound to the late stage of the 8th revolution. With such sword skills combined with sword intent, his combat strength wouldn't be inferior to some swordsmen who had tempered their sword intent and profound to the late stage of the 8th revolution. Tian Xiaoyu was the young lord of the Tian Xiao clan. If there were no accidents, he would be the future patriarch. He had a lot of authority and could make decisions on some matters without needing to be reported. Chu Mu was arranged to stay in a courtyard called the Green Bamboo Garden. It was filled with green sword bamboos. Green sword bamboos were a kind of bamboo that was green and gentle like jade. Each leaf was like a sharp sword. The leaves seemed to be covered with a layer of fluorescent light, making the edges of the leaves look like the edge of a sword. They emitted a faint sharpness. A single leaf was nothing, but there were thousands of green sword bamboos here. Each green sword bamboo had hundreds of leaves. With so many sharpness gathered together, the sharpness of the sharpness was so strong that ordinary divine condensation realm swordsmen wouldn't be able to withstand it. Therefore, when a servant knew that Tian Xiaoyu had arranged for Chu Mu to stay in the green bamboo garden, he was very surprised. "Brother Chu, what do you think of this green bamboo garden?" Tian Xiaoyu brought Chu Mu into the green bamboo garden and asked. He wasn't as good as Chu Mu, but he could withstand the sharpness of the green bamboo garden. However, He couldn't stay here for too long, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Very good. Chu Mu looked around and sensed the dense sharpness in the air. It was as if there were thousands of sword qi crisscrossing. He was very satisfied with the environment here. Li Jiwen was also very satisfied with this place. Unfortunately, it was arranged for Chu Mu. His residence was one level lower than the green bamboo garden. However, there was nothing he could do. Whether it was his swordsmanship or talent, he was obviously inferior to Chu Mu. If he had Chu Mu's ability, it wouldn't be impossible for him to stay in a place like the green bamboo garden. Li Jiwen couldn't stay in a place like this for too long. Alright, Brother Chu, you should rest first. I'll go take care of something. We'll drink wine together later, said Tian Xiaoyu. He had just returned and still had time to take care of things. Chapter 9:15. As the wind blew, the bamboo forest swayed and the bamboo leaves rustled. Countless sharpness spread out from the leaves like endless sword qi drifting in the air. Sunlight shone through the atmosphere. Every bamboo leaf that was like a sword had light refracted from them. The air was filled with countless brilliant lights, making it extremely gorgeous. Green Bamboo Garden was filled with green sword bamboos. Chu Mu felt very comfortable cultivating in this environment. There was a house and a pavilion in Green Bamboo Garden. At this moment, Chu Mu was sitting on a cushion in the pavilion with his eyes closed. He was concentrating on cultivating the Sky Desolate Sword essence. His left and right hands were holding a piece of upper-grade origin crystal. Upper-grade origin crystals were energy crystals suitable for king-level experts to cultivate. Although Chu Mu was not a king-level expert, his sword intent and profound were very powerful in all aspects. He could barely absorb the energy of upper-grade origin crystals for cultivation. The effect was better than absorbing middle-grade origin crystals. The sharpness of the green sword bamboos put Chu Mu in constant resistance. In this way, he could temper his mind to a certain extent and indirectly refine his sword essence, increasing its purity. Brother Zhang, I've already investigated clearly. The person living in the green bamboo garden is called Chu Mu. He's one of the geniuses that came from all over the West Lake region. His sword intent and profound have been refined to the limits of the 8th rank. Moreover, he obtained first place in the young master's sword technique competition on the heaven-shattering ship. He is highly valued by the young master, so the young master gave the green bamboo garden to him. In a manner, a swordsman wearing a short gown spoke to a cold and arrogant young swordsman. No matter how highly valued he is still a family general of the Tianqiao clan. Zhang Heng sneered. That's right. Even Brother Zhang didn't live in Green Bamboo Garden. What qualifications does a lowly person from outside the West Lake region have? The swordsman sneered in disdain. Zhang Heng didn't say anything else. He walked away from the manor and strode towards Green Bamboo Garden. The name of the Green Bamboo Garden was very ordinary and there was nothing special about it. However, the people of the Tianqiao clan knew that it was not ordinary at all. It could be said that the Green Bamboo Garden was the #1 garden in the Tianqiao clan below the king-level gardens. Whoever lived in the Green Bamboo Garden would, in a certain sense, be the #1 person below the king level in the Tianqiao clan. Zhang Heng was born in the West Tiger Territory. Even though he wasn't a member of a major clan or faction, he believed that he was of noble birth compared to the people outside the West Tiger Territory. He had extraordinary talent and his soul spirit was much stronger than ordinary sword practitioners. Moreover, he was recruited by Tianqiao Yu a few years ago and joined the Tianqiao clan. With the environment and resources of the Tianqiao clan, his strength improved very quickly. His sword intent had reached the peak of the 8th revolution, and his 3 profundities had also been tempered to the peak of the 8th revolution. His sword technique had even reached the 8th level of the sword technique domain. In the entire Tianqiao clan, he had defeated all the swordsmen below the king stage. Including the disciples of the Tianqiao clan, He had become the #1 person below the king stage in the Tianxiao clan. He was highly valued and treated extremely well. Naturally, Zhang Heng's temperament had also quietly changed. He began to think highly of himself. He believed that he had considerable authority in the Tianxiao clan and that he wouldn't be much weaker than the young master, Tianxiao Yu. He had always wanted to live in the green bamboo garden. Unfortunately, Tianxiao Yu wasn't willing. If no one lived in the green bamboo garden, even if Zhang Heng was unhappy, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem was that someone was living in the green bamboo garden now. Moreover, it was a person of low birth, who came from outside the West Tiger territory. Tianxiao Yu was talking to his father at this moment. Suddenly, he thought of something and his expression changed immediately. "What's wrong?" his father asked indifferently. "Nothing. I just suddenly thought that if we arrange for Chu Mu to live in the green bamboo garden, Zhang Heng might get into trouble." Tianxiao Yu knew Zhang Heng very well. "Don't worry. Zhang Heng's sword intent and profound have been tempered to the peak of the 8th revolution. His sword skills are extraordinary. He is indeed a peerless genius. Your new friend, Chu Mu, has reached the peak of the 8th revolution in sword intent and profound. His sword skills are also not bad. Let them fight. If Chu Mu wins, you have to befriend him wholeheartedly." "I understand." Tianxiao Yu said, "Father, I'll go first to avoid any problems." Go. Soon, Zhang Heng and the short-robed swordsman arrived outside the green bamboo garden. With a cold smile, Zhang Heng walked into the green bamboo garden. Just as the swordsman took a step forward, he immediately retracted his foot. The tyrannical sharpness of the green bamboo garden made him not dare to take even half a step forward. When someone walked into the green bamboo garden, the sharpness of the green bamboo garden was immediately affected. Through the vibrations in the air, Chu Mu immediately sensed it. However, Chu Mu did not care about it. After entering the green bamboo garden, Zhang Heng saw Chu Mu sitting cross-legged in the pavilion with a cold smile on his face. He walked over with large strides, emitting a strong aura that was as sharp as a sword. A strong hostility was also released. Immediately, a strong wind blew in the green bamboo garden, whistling. Countless sharpness auras surged over as if they were angered by Zhang Heng. "A mere inanimate object dares to go against me? Break!" Zhang Heng roared. His voice was like a divine sword slashing down. The sword intent of the 8th revolution gushed out from his body, and a terrifying sharpness swept in all directions. Suddenly, there were countless sounds of metal clashing in the air, and countless sparks flew in all directions. Chu Mu also sensed the strong hostility. His closed eyes instantly opened. In an instant, the sharpness of the green bamboo garden seemed to have gained a backbone. It merged with Chu Mu's gaze. As it roared, it merged into two sharp swords of divine light that shot through the sky, piercing through the layers of space-time and shooting towards Zhang Heng. Zhang Heng was shocked. He could not dodge at all and was directly hit by Chu Mu's divine swords. His mental world was shaken, and his divine sense was disrupted before he could form an effective resistance. With a muffled groan, Zhang Heng's face was pale, and his eyes were lifeless. He could not help but take a few steps back and spit out a mouthful of blood. In just one exchange, he was injured. Moreover, it was an injury to his mental world. Zhang Heng did not dare to stay here any longer. He turned around and quickly left, spitting out another mouthful of blood. Otherwise, it would be very uncomfortable. Zhang Heng originally wanted to teach Chu Mu a lesson and let him understand that he was not qualified to live in the green bamboo garden. He never thought that in just one exchange, before he even made a move, his mental world would be injured by Chu Mu. An injury to the mental world was more troublesome than an injury to the body. If it was not healed in time, it would leave behind very bad sequelae. Zhang Heng rushed out of the green bamboo garden without saying a word. Under the puzzled gaze of the short-robed swordsman, he quickly left. He just happened to pass by Tianxiao Yu, who also saw Zhang Heng's pale face and the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Zhang Heng did not even greet him. Tian Xiaoyu was used to Zhang Heng's arrogance, but when he saw Zhang Heng's appearance, he knew that Zhang Heng was injured, and it was not light. Otherwise, he would not have left so quickly. Tian Xiaoyu retracted his gaze and walked into the green bamboo garden. He saw Chu Mu in the pavilion and strode over. "Brother Chu, you really have good methods." Tian Xiaoyu sighed. "This Zhang Heng's sword intent has been refined to the peak of the 8th revolution. He has exceptional talent and extraordinary sword skills. After becoming a general of my Tian Xiao clan a few years ago, he relied on his talent and became increasingly arrogant. He asked me for the green bamboo garden many times, but I did not agree. This time, he probably knows that Brother Chu is living in the green bamboo garden and came to find trouble with you." His words explained the reason for Zhang Heng's sudden arrival. "I am also borrowing green bamboo garden's sharpness," Chu Mu said. He was cultivating, trying to fuse with green bamboo garden's sharpness aura. Zhang Heng's hostility stimulated green bamboo garden's sharpness aura and stimulated Chu Mu. In an instant, Chu Mu found a point of convergence with green bamboo garden's sharpness aura and fused them into one. They condensed into 2 divine light swords and shot into the sky to attack Zhang Heng. Zhang Heng's soul was not as strong as Chu Mu's to begin with, so his divine sense was naturally inferior to Chu Mu's. Under the attack of the divine light swords, he could not resist at all and his mental world was immediately injured. If not for Chu Mu's weak fusion with green bamboo garden's sharpness, the 2 divine light swords would have been enough to shatter Zhang Heng's mental world and kill him. Of course, that was also because Zhang Heng did not have time to use a defensive divine sense secret technique. Everything happened too quickly and too suddenly, it was completely out of Zhang Heng's expectations. After this, Zhang Heng should have restrained himself and will not dare to find trouble with you again. Tian Xiaoyu smiled. His mental world is injured. He won't be able to recover without some time, Chu Mu said with a slight smile. Let's not talk about Zhang Heng anymore. I brought some good wine. Let's have a good taste. Tian Xiaoyu waved his hand and a few small wine bottles appeared in front of him. Each of them was carved from white jade and looked as if they were naturally formed. They were extremely valuable. Chu Mu did not stand on ceremony and began to enjoy the wine with Tian Xiaoyu. They chatted while enjoying the wine. "Brother Tian Xiaoyu, do you know anything about the major forces in the West Tiger region?" Chu Mu asked. "Brother Chu, you want to ask about the major forces that are about to open their mountain gates, right?" Tian Xiaoyu smiled and said, "There are countless forces in the West Tiger region, big and small. The Tian Xiao clan that I belong to is one of the many forces. However, among these forces there are 6 that are the most powerful. They are above all the other forces." After a pause, Tian Xiaoyu continued, "These 6 forces are the West Tiger Palace, the Shattered Star Tower, the Sky-Splitting Sword Sect, the Flying Heaven Pavilion, the Extreme Black Palace, and the Wanda Villa. The West Tiger Palace is a branch of the Heavenly Sword Hall in the West Tiger region. It does not recruit disciples and is a little special. It has a high status and is number 1 in the West Tiger region. As for the Shattered Star Tower, the Sky-Splitting Sword Sect, the Flying Heaven Pavilion, the Extreme Black Palace, and the Wanda Villa, they are on par with each other. However, there are some differences. The Shattered Star Tower and the Flying Heaven Pavilion only recruit true geniuses. Therefore, they have fewer disciples. However, the quality of their disciples is very high. Compared to the 2, the Shattered Star Tower is more mysterious. I don't know how to recruit disciples after opening their mountain gate. The Sky-Splitting Sword Sect, the Extreme Black Palace, and the Wanda Villa are more open to the public. As long as one can pass their test, one can become a disciple. However, the Extreme Black Palace is more unscrupulous and somewhat evil. The Wanda Villa is more focused on inheritance. After joining the Wanda Villa, one cannot leave for the rest of one's life. Chapter 9:16. In the green bamboo garden, only Chu Mu sat alone in the pavilion, looking at the green sword bamboos and lost in thought. The five forces, shattered star tower, flying heaven pavilion, sky-splitting sword sect, extreme black palace, and myriad mountains villa, were about the same in terms of strength, but there were slight differences in nature. Shattered star tower is not suitable. I don't like extreme black palace. Myriad mountains villa is not suitable. After thinking about it, Chu Mu finally decided to go to the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The Flying Heaven Pavilion and Shattered Star Tower only recruited geniuses among geniuses. With Chu Mu's talent and strength, as long as the people in the Flying Heaven Pavilion were not blind, they would definitely not miss out on Chu Mu. Having made up his mind, Chu Mu temporarily put aside his thoughts about the five forces and turned to study the strange attack that had injured Zhang Heng's spiritual world. The feeling of merging with the sharpness of the green bamboo garden. Such an attack is similar to the description of the second half of the secret technique Pupils of Sword. Chu Mu muttered. He had not cultivated the second half of the Eye of the Sword for more than half a year on the Hongtian airship. Instead, he had been consolidating the first half, making the Sword of Divine Will more solid and smooth. It had reached its peak. Now it was time to cultivate the second half of the Eye of the Sword. The second half of the Pupils of Sword was very profound and mysterious. It was not easy to practice, but Chu Mu had found inspiration. That was the sharpness of the green bamboo garden. Starting from there, it would be easier to practice the second half of the Pupils of Sword. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Zhang Heng's spiritual world was injured, so he immediately went into seclusion to heal. With the help of some rare elixirs and special techniques, he quickly recovered. Chu Mu basically stayed in the green bamboo garden to meditate and gradually comprehend. At this time, someone came to the green bamboo garden and did not dare to enter. Your Excellency Chu Mu. Your Excellency Chu Mu. This person was Tian Xiaoyu's servant. When he called out, a figure flashed and he immediately retreated. When he saw that it was Chu Mu, he was relieved. What's the matter? Chu Mu asked. Young master invites you, the servant hurriedly said. Lead the way. Chu Mu didn't ask what the matter was. Seeing the anxious expression on the servant's face, it should be something urgent. He would know when he went over. The servant also had the cultivation of the deity congealing realm, and his running speed wasn't slow. Chu Mu, on the other hand, followed behind him at a leisurely pace. Not long after, Chu Mu followed the servant to a sword battle arena of the Tianxiao clan. There were two swordsmen fighting on it. Tianxiao Yu was there, and there were also some people from the Tianxiao clan. In addition, not far away from Tianxiao Yu, there was also a young man who was around the same age as Tianxiao Yu. There was a group of people standing behind him, and all of them were sneering. The injuries on Zhang Heng's spiritual world had already healed. He stood next to Tianxia. When he saw Chu Mu, his face suddenly turned gloomy. Brother Chu, you're here? Tianxiao Yu hurriedly greeted him. Brother Tianxiao, what's the matter? Chu Mu walked to Tianxiao Yu's side and asked. I need Brother Chu's help. Tianxiao Yu explained, and Zhang Heng beside him became even more displeased. Brother Chu, you already know that my Tianxiao clan mainly deals in artifacts. In this West Tiger City, there's another clan that also deals in artifacts like my Tianxiao clan. Each of them occupies half of the city. Tianxiao clan explained briefly. This clan is the Xuanji clan. The Tianxiao clan and the Xuanji clan were originally friendly. Later, due to a conflict of interests, it led to a conflict. Since then, we've been opposing each other. Then, Tianxiao Yu gestured to the seemingly unbridled and fearless young man opposite him. He's Xuanji Wudao of the Xuanji clan. He's the son of the Xuanji clan's patriarch and the young lord of the Xuanji clan. He also has an older sister. We've been at odds since we were young. This time, He might have recruited some experts and specially came to show off and slap my face. Tian Xiaoyu said. In just a few words, Tian Xiaoyu basically explained the Tian Xiao clan and the Xuanji clan to Chu Mu clearly, allowing Chu Mu to have a direct understanding of them. People of the same trade were enemies. This had been the case since ancient times. Moreover, they were on good terms at the beginning, but later on it led to a conflict of interest. It was already good that a war hadn't broken out. Brother Tian Xiao, don't worry. If you need my help, just let me know. Chu Mu said. Then I'm relieved. Tian Xiaoyu smiled. Zhang Heng beside him was even more displeased. At this moment, the outcome of the battle on the battle arena was decided. Tian Xiaoyu's man was sent flying by a sword and was severely injured. He kept vomiting blood and was hurriedly carried down. Brother Yu, this new recruit of mine is pretty strong, right? Xuanji said with a smile. After all, it was his people who had won. He's indeed quite capable. Tian Xiaoyu didn't lose to his imposing manner. Hearing this, he smiled and handed over 100,000 high-grade origin crystals. This was the bet. Brother Yu, do you still want to continue? Xuanji Wudao smiled. His arrogance was deeply hidden in his smile. If you want to continue, we'll double the bet. 100,000 high-grade origin crystals. Doubling the bet was equivalent to 200,000 high-grade origin crystals. For Tian Xiaoyu, this was a huge amount of personal wealth. Okay. Tian Xiaoyu agreed directly. He had fought with Xuanji Wudao for a long time and both of them had won and lost. He also understood Xuanji Wudao's temperament. If he didn't agree now, he would be seen as a coward. Xuanji Wudao would definitely use other methods to provoke him. It was better to agree quickly. The outcome was still unknown. Straightforward. Xuanji Wudao laughed loudly. I'll let him fight. You can do whatever you want. While Tian Xiaoyu was hesitating whether to ask Chu Mu to fight, Zhang Heng volunteered. He smiled coldly and said, You're just a clown. Let me defeat you. Then, without waiting for Tian Xiaoyu's agreement, Zhang Heng flew up and landed on the battle arena. He faced Xuanji Wudao's swordsmanship tit for tat. The battle arena was opened. The battle inside wasn't a battle of sword arts, but a real battle. The kind that required real strength. The swordsman recruited by Xuanji Wudao was extraordinary. He was in the state of one with the sword and could use sword skills. Zhang Heng took out his sword and immediately fought fiercely with his opponent. Both of them used sword skills to attack each other. After 3 sword skills, the swordsman was immediately sent flying by Zhang Heng's sword. A huge wound appeared on his body and blood gushed out. Brother Wudao, I won this round. Tian Xiaoyu smiled. Xuanji Wudao's eyes flashed with anger. Then, he smiled and said, Okay, I admit defeat. The 200,000 high-grade origin crystals are yours. However, do you dare to fight the third round with me? 500,000 high-grade origin crystals. Why wouldn't I dare? Before Tian Xiaoyu could say anything, Zhang Heng spoke first. Tian Xiaoyu frowned but didn't say anything. Xuanji Wudao didn't say anything. He just signaled a young swordsman next to him to get on the battle arena. The young swordsman's face was cold, as if he didn't care about life. It was chilling. As soon as he got on the battle arena, he emitted a sharp aura with a shocking chill. It was as if the air around him was going to freeze. Zhang Heng was startled. He was very vigilant. This young swordsman gave him a dangerous feeling. You're not my opponent, the young swordsman said. Cut the crap. Take my sword. Zhang Heng raised his eyebrows and shouted coldly. He took out his sword and used his sword skill. Raging flames rolled out. This was a probing attack. It was a first-grade human-class Earthbreaker sword skill. Child's play. Zhang Heng tried to probe his opponent, but his opponent immediately used a powerful sword skill. With a slash of his sword, a white tiger transformed into a heaven-shaking roar, breaking through the torrent of flames and rushing towards Zhang Heng. This was a sword skill that combined two profound meanings, and its power was overwhelming. Zhang Heng was startled. He quickly used his second-grade human-class Earthbreaker sword skill to resist. The young swordsman's sword intent was the same as Zhang Heng's. They were both at the peak of the 8th revolution. They were evenly matched. Immediately, the two sides engaged in a fierce battle. The first-grade human-class Earthbreaker sword skill and the second-grade human-class Earthbreaker sword skill were both used. They either dodged, clashed, or used defensive sword skills. The battle was very intense and exciting. The audience couldn't take their eyes off of it. Xuanji Wudao seemed to be very confident in the young swordsman. He had his hands behind his back, looking as if victory was already in his grasp. Zhang Heng was unhappy that he couldn't defeat his opponent quickly. He kept increasing his strength, but he still couldn't defeat his opponent. When the two sides got close to each other, they would also use their sword skills. This sword skill was fused with sword intent. Although it wasn't as powerful as a sword skill, it was still very powerful. Once hit, injuries were inevitable. As soon as they clashed, Chu Mu could see that the young swordsman's sword skills were slightly better than Zhang Heng's. He estimated that the young swordsman was at the peak of the 8th layer. In terms of the depth of his sword skills, he had also reached half-step form, which was comparable to Jiang Kaidai. He could be considered a very powerful sword genius. For a moment, the two sides were neck and neck. Zhang Heng indeed had the right to be proud. However, Chu Mu had a feeling that this young swordsman didn't seem to be using his full strength. Tian Xiaoyu naturally hoped that Zhang Heng could win. Although he didn't like this young swordsman, it was related to the 500,000 upper-grade origin crystals and his face. Your strength is only SOSO. The young swordsman suddenly retreated and said coldly. A shocking cold aura burst out of his body. It penetrated the seal like a cold wind, causing everyone to shiver. Shortly after, the young swordsman used his sword skill again. This time, the sword skill was no small matter. With a slash of his sword, a stream of ice appeared. It was a sword skill fused with the profound of ice and water. Shortly after, he waved his sword again. Snow fell from the sky and covered the stream of ice with a layer of frost, greatly increasing the power of the stream of ice. Shortly after, the young swordsman used his sword again. Mist filled the sky and covered Zhang Heng. First, it was a second-grade earth-shattering sword skill, followed by a first-grade earth-shattering sword skill. Under the fusion of their power, it reached the level of a second-grade and a half-earth-shattering sword skill. Another first-grade earth-shattering sword skill was used to confuse Zhang Heng. In the end, the young swordsman seemed to have fused with the sword in his hand. A cold sword light broke through the layers of mist and slashed out. The cold young swordsman displayed astonishing talent. His ice profundity, water profundity, snow profundity, and mist profundity had all been refined to the peak of the 8th rank. In terms of talent, he was superior to Zhang Heng. In terms of sword skills, he was indeed superior to Zhang Heng. Chapter 9:17. Danger had arrived. Zhang Heng had lost his target under the continuous attacks of the three sword skills. He could vaguely feel the danger coming from all directions, but it was hard to judge. Use my strongest attack, Zhang Heng murmured to himself. His aura exploded completely as all the power in his body surged and poured into his sword. The sharp sword vibrated slightly, and the pressure in the air increased by a few times. Burning mountain! Amidst the low roar, the temperature in the air suddenly increased. It was as if the whole mountain was on fire, burning all the trees, flowers, and rocks in the mountain. The earth-breaching sword skill of the human tier 3rd grade, fire profound, wood profound, and earth profound merged into one. All of a sudden, the whole arena was covered in fire. All the ice and snow melted, and the ceiling light of the arena flickered, preventing the power of the fire from destroying it. The cold young swordsman's body appeared in the fire, covered in a layer of frost. He fought against the fire and threw out a sword attack. Snow heaven and earth. The sky was covered in snow, and the ground was covered in ice. The third-rank earth-breaking sword skill contained the power of snow profound, water profound, and ice profound. The two opposing powers started to fight against each other. Amidst the sizzling sound, countless white smoke filled the arena, covering everything. Zhang Heng and the cold young swordsman both disappeared without a trace. This was the power of the third-rank earth-breaking sword skill. It covered the whole area. Xuanji Wudao and Tianqia both narrowed their eyes, but they could not see what was inside the thick white smoke. Only Chu Mu and the king-level warriors could see. In the thick white smoke, the sword skills collided and cancelled each other out. The cold young swordsman approached Zhang Heng. His sword was like snow in the sky, and the sky was endless. Zhang Heng's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly waved his sword to fight back, trying to injure both of them. The cold young swordsman seemed to have seen through it, but he was not afraid at all. His sword's speed suddenly increased, and a cold air spread out from the sword. It affected Zhang Heng's movement a little bit, making him slightly stiff. That moment was enough to decide life and death. Amidst the thick white smoke, the crowd only heard the sound of metal clashing. Then, they saw a figure fly out, and blood seemed to be spraying in the air. Zhang Heng. Tian Xiaoyu's expression changed. Although Zhang Heng had outstanding talent, was very arrogant, and looked down on everyone. He even disrespected him, the young lord of the Tianqiao clan, but his strength was indeed extraordinary. Moreover, the bet this time was 500,000 upper-grade profound crystals, which was half of the profound crystals that Tianqiao had. If Zhang Heng lost, Tianqia would have to pay Xuanji Wudao 500,000 high-grade origin crystals, which made his heart bleed. In the first round, Zhang Heng lost 100,000 origin crystals. In the second round, he won 200,000 origin crystals. In the third round, he lost another 500,000 origin crystals. In total, he had lost 400,000 high-grade origin crystals to Xuanji, which was almost half of his personal wealth. Thank you for your generosity, brother Tianqiao. Xuanji, who had earned 400,000 high-grade origin crystals, smiled at Tianqiao. His complacent look made Tianqiao's mouth twitch. I wonder if brother Tianqiao has any capable warriors who can fight against my subordinate, Leng Changfeng. Xuanji Wudao continued. The provocation in his tone was very obvious. Tianqiao was a little embarrassed. He didn't expect Xuanji Wudao to recruit such a powerful genius this time, who was even stronger than Zhang Heng. Brother Tianqiao, accept his challenge. Chu Mu transmitted his voice. Tianqiao's eyes suddenly lit up. He met Xuanji Wudao's provocative gaze and said, "All right, I'll bet 1,000,000 origin crystals for this battle." Xuanji Wudao's expression changed drastically when he heard Tianqiao use words. Zhang Heng, who was about to leave after wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, was also shocked. Chu Mu was startled. He didn't expect Tianqiao to have so much confidence in him. 1,000,000 origin crystals. Xuanji Wudao's lips curled into a playful smile. Do you have it? Brother Xuanji, you don't have to worry about whether I have it or not. If your warriors win against my friend, I will naturally give you 1,000,000 origin crystals. Tianqiao said indifferently. Even if he didn't have 1,000,000 origin crystals, he could still borrow them. All right, since brother Tianqiao insists on giving me 1,000,000 origin crystals, I won't be polite. Xuanji Wudao laughed. He looked at the cold young swordsman on the battle stage and said, Leng Changfeng, if you win this battle again, I will give you 200,000 origin crystals. The word give made Leng Changfeng's eyebrows twitch. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied, but he didn't refute. If you haven't recovered your strength, I can wait. Chu Mu looked at Leng Changfeng and said, No need. Leng Changfeng said concisely. Since the other party didn't appreciate his kindness, Chu Mu jumped and landed lightly on the battle stage. Take my sword. Ling Chongfeng spat out 2 words coldly. It was as if the extreme north wind had passed through, freezing the world. He unsheathed his sword. Sword light spread out like ice and snow, and the temperature suddenly dropped. His first move was a sword skill. Although it was only a first-grade earth-breaking sword skill, it was still powerful enough. Sword skill against sword skill. Wind blade was released, and a green-gold wind blade tore through the sky. Moving with the wind, Chu Mu followed closely behind the green-gold wind blade. His body was faintly discernible, drifting unpredictably as he flew towards Ling Chongfeng. Sword skills collided and cancelled each other out. Sword light flashed. Their bodies passed by each other, and then they turned and attacked again. Ice stream cut. Ling Chongfeng shouted. His sword was covered with a layer of ice, and he slashed towards Chu Mu at close range. This sword skill was made of ice profound and water profound. It was a close combat sword skill that Ling Chongfeng created himself. Wind blade. This sword skill contained the ultimate mountain quaking energy, and its power surpassed the average second-grade earth-breaking sword skill. If Chu Mu used the sword intent and profound of the 9th revolution, the power of this sword skill would surpass the average second-grade earth-breaking sword skill. Ice stream cut and wind blade collided. Ling Chongfeng's face changed in an instant. Ice stream cut was a sword skill that combined the profound of ice and water. It would freeze the opponent and reduce the opponent's speed, allowing the user to gain the upper hand and kill the opponent directly. In fact, it was not as powerful as the profound of gold and wind, not to mention that Chu Mu's sword also contained the high-frequency vibration power of the ultimate mountain quaking energy. Under the vibration, the ice stream collapsed, and the terrifying mountain quaking energy spread out. The sharpness of the dual profound of gold and wind also swept across. Ling Chongfeng hurriedly shook his arms at a high frequency to dissolve this terrifying power, and at the same time, his body rapidly retreated. Chu Mu slashed out again, and it was still the sword skill wind blade. A touch of greenish gold slashed through Ling Chongfeng's body, shattering it with a crack. Ice shards splashed everywhere. It was a fake body. It was one of Ling Chongfeng's escape sword skills. The sword was swung and the cold air came again. Snow covered the sky and frost covered the earth. Snow, heaven and earth. It was another third-grade human-tier earth-breaching sword skill. Its power was astounding. Chu Mu had seen the power of this move once, so he was not afraid at all. The sword was swung, and there seemed to be a flood of magma on the blade. The crowd only felt the ground shake, and the sword battle stage seemed to be collapsing. The earth seemed to be breaking apart, and a terrifying power rushed towards Ling Chongfeng from the bottom of the sword battle stage. Then, under Ling Chongfeng's feet, a terrifying power rushed out from the ground. Ling Chongfeng was shocked and hurriedly dodged. A volcano rushed out from the ground of the sword battle arena, and with a rumbling sound, a torrent of magma soared into the sky, wreaking havoc in all directions. The terrifying heat spread out, melting the snow and ice on the ground bit by bit during the confrontation. Ling Chongfeng dodged quickly, but he was still affected by the eruption of the volcano. He constantly pushed his body to resist, and his figure retreated again and again. Finally, he retreated to the edge of the sword battle stage, his face pale. What a terrifying power! It can actually last for one more breath. Ling Chongfeng thought. He could clearly feel it. Different profoundness had different characteristics, and sword skills based on profoundness would also have the characteristics of those profoundness. Some profoundness excelled in endurance, such as water profoundness. Some profoundness excelled in vitality, such as wood profoundness. Some profoundness excelled in stability, such as earth profoundness. Some profoundness excelled in sharpness, such as metal profoundness. And some profoundness excelled in explosive power, such as fire profoundness. Chu Mu's third-grade earth-breaking sword skill, volcano exploding, was obviously the kind of sword skill that focused on instantaneous explosive power. It was destined to be unable to last. The power would only last for a moment, and if one could avoid or block it, they would be safe. What was beyond Ling Chongfeng's expectation was that Chu Mu's sword skill's explosive power actually lasted for one more breath, and he was injured. He didn't know that this was the result of Chu Mu comprehending the imperishable sword intent. Although he hadn't comprehended the imperishable sword intent, his sword intent had undergone a slight change, and could last for one more breath. Sometimes, one breath's time was enough to change the outcome of a battle. The two sides had fought several times, and so far, Ling Chongfeng had been injured. However, Chu Mu wouldn't go easy just because his opponent was injured. He still used the same sword skill, volcano exploding. A terrifying volcano appeared, and magma torrents raged in all directions. The ice and snow on the battle stage melted and disappeared, and countless white smoke filled the air. Under the high temperature, Ling Chongfeng could only release a shocking amount of cold air to avoid the eruption. Chu Mu's figure rapidly approached. He was faintly discernible and soundless, making it hard for Ling Chongfeng to grasp him. The sword circled around his body, and he performed a second-grade earth-breaking sword skill, Ice Flow. The sword skill, Wind-Cutting Sword, tore open the sky, broke the ice flow, and Ling Chongfeng's protective sword aura under high-frequency vibrations, and slashed at Ling Chongfeng's body. In an instant, Ling Chongfeng's robe was torn and fluttered in the wind. His inner armor offset most of the sword skill's power, but a small part of it still shook his body. Ling Chongfeng was sent flying, and he spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. "You let me win." Chu Mu put away the no-return sword. Ling Chongfeng was injured, and his battle strength was greatly weakened. If they fought again, he wouldn't be Chu Mu's opponent at all. Naturally, there was no need to continue the battle. "Brother Xuanji, thank you for your Yuanjing." Tianqia immediately smiled and said to Xuanji Wudao. Xuanji Wudao's face was gloomy, and dark clouds covered the sky like a thunderstorm was about to descend. He stared at Chu Mu, as if he wanted to kill Chu Mu with his gaze. After 3 breaths, he snorted coldly, and his face returned to normal. He took out 1,000,000 upper-grade Yuanjing. Chapter 9:18. Ling Chongfeng was injured, and Xuanji Wudao didn't have any more family members to fight. Although he was extremely unwilling, he could only turn around and leave in a hurry. He was furious. He was furious with Tian Xiaoyu, furious with Chu Mu, and furious with Ling Chongfeng. "Brother Chu, I'm lucky to have you today." Tian Xiaoyu looked at Chu Mu sincerely. "I don't have many friends," Chu Mu said with a smile. He believed that Tian Xiaoyu could understand the meaning behind his word. "That's right, we are good friends." Tian Xiaoyu laughed and immediately put away a portion of the 1,000,000 high-grade origin crystals. He put the rest into a spatial bracelet and handed it to Chu Mu. In a place like the ancient Sword Continent, spatial bracelets still had some value. But in the immemorial world, they were usually used to store large amounts of things. Its value was far from comparable to a spatial ring. Chu Mu took a look at the spatial wristband and was shocked. He pushed it back. "No, Brother Chu, these 500,000 high-grade origin crystals are what you deserve," Tian Xiaoyu said seriously. "Even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly. If you hadn't helped me this time, I would have been in debt." Chu Mu looked into Tian Xiaoyu's eyes for 3 breaths and saw sincerity. He didn't refuse and accepted the spatial bracelet. 500,000 high-grade origin crystals. The others were all shocked. Tian Xiaoyu was really generous. He actually gave half of the 1,000,000 high-grade origin crystals to Chu Mu. 500,000 high-grade origin crystals. At the same time, their eyes flashed with greed as they looked at Chu Mu's finger. There should be a spatial ring there. In fact, Tian Xiaoyu's action of giving Chu Mu 500,000 high-grade origin crystals seemed crazy. If they were to split, it would be 200,000 at most. 500,000 was too much. In fact, he wasn't crazy and didn't suffer a loss at all. In the end, Tianqia won 4 rounds of gambling with Xuanji Wudao. Not only did he get back his high-grade crystals, but he also earned an additional 600,000 high-grade crystals. Even if he gave 500,000 to Chu Mu, he would still make a net profit of 100,000 high-grade crystals. Not only that, but his friendship with Chu Mu would also become even more stable. He also won a reputation for being forthright. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Zhang Heng, who was extremely ashamed of being defeated, didn't know that Chu Mu had defeated Ling Changfeng. He also didn't know that Xuanji Wudao had left in a hurry. He also didn't know that Chu Mu had received 500,000 high-grade crystals. However, he would soon know that jealousy was like wild grass that grew crazily. After the matter with Xuanji Wudao, Chu Mu stayed in the green bamboo garden to cultivate. Because of the sharpness of the green bamboo garden, the cultivation of the second half of the pupils of the sword was gradually on the right track. The sword of spiritual sense seemed to have become more complete. The sky desolate sword origin was constantly becoming denser and denser. It was only a step away from reaching the peak of the spirit condensation realm. Deshang's cultivation of the heaven-seizing art didn't make much progress. This was the problem that Chu Mu needed to solve at the moment. A month had passed. During this time, Tian Xiaoyu came a few times to chat and drink with Chu Mu. This time, Tian Xiaoyu came again. Looking at his radiant face, it seemed like something good had happened. Brother Chu, it's good news. The gates of the 5 major powers have opened. Their people have already arrived at West Tiger City, Tian Xiaoyu shouted when he saw Chu Mu from afar. West Tiger City was only one of the cities in the West Tiger Great Domain. The 5 great forces and the other forces that were slightly weaker than the 5 great forces were all located somewhere in the West Tiger Great Domain outside West Tiger City. The West Tiger territory was extremely vast and had countless resources and spirit veins. These forces would definitely not let go of this opportunity. Brother Chu, have you decided which force you want to go to? Tian Xiaoyu asked. Flying Heaven Pavilion, Chu Mu said. Flying Heaven Pavilion. Tian Xiaoyu was startled and then nodded. That's good. Although the Flying Heaven Pavilion has high requirements, with Brother Chu's talent, you will definitely be able to enter. What about you, Brother Tian Xiao? Chu Mu asked. Tianqia pointed at her own nose, and then she said with a smile, I also want to head to the Soaring Pavilion with Brother Chu. Unfortunately, I'm the young master of the Tianxiao clan, and I'll inherit the position of patriarch of the Tianxiao clan in the future. Before that, I have all sorts of things to do, and cultivation isn't my only priority. So, Chu Mu nodded. A major clan had its benefits, but there were also some constraints. However, Tian Xiaoyu was the young lord of the Tianxiao clan and would inherit the position of clan master in the future. He could enjoy all the resources of the Tianxiao clan. It was also very helpful to improve his strength. Even if he did not focus on cultivation, his future would not be too bad. Moreover, the clan master had powerful guards. Brother Chu, I will take you to the station of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Tian Xiaoyu said. Every major power had a station in West Tiger City. It was like an office or something like that. If one wanted to join a major power in the beginning, they would go to the station of the major power once they had decided. The station of the Flying Heaven Pavilion was a 3-story pavilion. At this time, a large number of swordsmen had gathered outside the pavilion. They did not look very old, and there were both men and women. These people were all geniuses from outside the West Tiger region and inside the West Tiger region. They were all full of confidence and wanted to enter the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The Flying Heaven Pavilion only recruited geniuses among geniuses. Many people knew this, but they still came here. This showed that they were very confident in their talent and strength. They believed that they were geniuses among geniuses and were qualified to join the Flying Heaven Pavilion. It was good to be confident. They might not be chosen by the Flying Heaven Pavilion to become a disciple. However, they would not know the result if they did not try. The door of the first floor of the pavilion was open. No one was outside to maintain order because there was no need. If anyone dared to cause trouble or disrupt the order here, they would be expelled or crippled. In the West Tiger region, other than the West Tiger Palace, the 5 major powers were the most tyrannical. The other powers could not compete with them at all. Chu Mu queued up while Tian Xiaoyu accompanied him. Chu Mu was secretly touched by her attitude. There were a total of 10 queues. Based on the current situation, there were about 300 people in each queue on average. There were more than 3,000 people gathered here in total. After half an hour, the number of people exceeded 6,000. 2 people walked out of the station of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Their white robes fluttered in the wind as if they were about to fly into the sky. The 2 of them looked like they were in their 30s. However, it was not clear how old they were. There were no sharp or powerful fluctuations on their bodies. However, the occasional wisp of aura they exuded let people know that they were very strong and could not be resisted. The moment the 2 of them appeared, more than 6,000 geniuses looked at them. The Flying Heaven Pavilion only recruits geniuses among geniuses. Those whose sword intent and profound are below rank 8 leave. One of the 2 said coldly. That's right. The disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion had refined their sword intent and profound to the early stage of rank 8. Compared to those rank 7 geniuses, they were indeed geniuses among geniuses. Once these words were said, there was an uproar among the crowd. It turned out that there were indeed geniuses among them, but most of their sword intent and profound had not reached rank 8. Or perhaps only one of them had reached rank 8. My sword skills are stronger than ordinary rank 8 geniuses. I think I am qualified to join the Flying Heaven Pavilion. One of them shouted. His sword intent had been refined to rank 8, but his profound had only been refined to the limit of rank 7. He was very unwilling to accept this. That's your business. The Flying Heaven Pavilion disciple replied coldly. The Flying Heaven Pavilion had its own principles and standard. Unless it was something too outrageous, it would not make an exception. There was no other way. Those who did not meet the standards could only leave one by one. In the blink of an eye, more than 6,000 people had left. There were less than 600 people left. Those who were eliminated did not stay here. Instead, they left immediately. Even if they could not join the Flying Heaven Pavilion, they still had a chance to join other forces, such as Sky-Splitting Sword Sect, Black Extreme Palace, Myriad Mountain Manor, and so on. No matter what, joining one of the 5 great forces was their goal. Those who stay, I'm sure your sword intent and profundities have all reached rank 8, but those who have less than 3 ultimate profundities or 4 total profundities, please leave. Another Flying Sky Pavilion disciple said. As soon as he said that, a portion of the 600 people's expressions changed. They didn't have 3 profounds, and most of them only had 2. Some of them had 3 profounds, but they hadn't refined all of them to the limit. Thus, they weren't qualified to pass the Flying Sky Pavilion's test. Helplessly, this was the Flying Heaven Pavilion's recruitment criteria. They could only leave unwillingly and go to other forces. With their talent, it would not be difficult for them to join the Sky-Splitting Sword Sect. There were only about 400 people left behind. Perhaps the Flying Heaven Pavilion's selection method was not perfect, and some late bloomer geniuses would be left out. However, there were many geniuses, and the Flying Heaven Pavilion would not make an exception for them. In fact, the Flying Heaven Pavilion had never lacked geniuses. Even if there were some mistakes, it would only be a few. It would not affect the overall situation. Geniuses who stayed, those who are over 50 years old will leave. The disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion said again. As soon as he said this, some people's expressions changed again. Because they had just reached 50 years old. In the end, there were exactly 300 people who stayed. Flying Sky Pavilion's initial selection criteria were 3. Rank 8 Sword Intent Profundities. The number of profundities refined to the limit must not be less than 3, or the number of profundities comprehended must not be less than 4, and the age must not exceed 50. After these 3 criteria, there were only 300 people left out of the original 6,000 people. In fact, those 6,000 people had spontaneously participated in the selection, but many of them were still eliminated. Compared to the deserted Flying Heaven Pavilion, the outpost of the Sky-Splitting Sword sect was crowded with tens of thousands of people. The outpost of the Extreme Black Palace was also crowded, and the outpost of the Myriad Mountains Villa was third. As for the Shattered Star Tower, it was more mysterious. No one knew how to enter it, so it was not as crowded as the Flying Heaven Pavilion. For generations, the Sky-Splitting Sword sect had always recruited the most disciples. The Extreme Black Palace was second, and the Myriad Mountains Villa was third. The Flying Heaven Pavilion and the Shattered Star Tower were on par. Chapter 9:19. In the pavilion of the Green Bamboo Garden, Chu Mu and Tianxiao sat opposite each other. In front of them, there was wine and food. Brother Chu, I wish you the best in the Flying Sky Pavilion. You'll be able to surpass all the other geniuses in the Flying Sky Pavilion. You'll be unparalleled in this generation. Tianxiao raised her wine cup and said, "Thank you for your kind words." Chu Mu also smiled. He raised his wine cup and clinked it with Tianxiao's before drinking. "Brother Chu, my father wants to see you." Tianxiao put down his wine cup and looked at Chu Mu. "Now?" Chu Mu was not surprised at all. "Now?" Tianxiao nodded. "Then let's go," Chu Mu said. The two got up and walked out of the Green Bamboo Garden with Tianxiao leading the way. With Tianxiao's strength, he indeed could not stay in the Green Bamboo Garden for a long time. However, he was the young master of the Tianxiao clan and had a secret treasure on him that could allow him to ignore the sharpness of the Green Bamboo Garden. No matter how long he stayed, he would be safe and sound. The patriarch of the Tianxiao clan, Tianxiao's father, was called Tianxiao Shou. When they saw Tianxiao Shou, he was assembling a beast-shaped puppet. "Father, Chu Mu is here." Tianxiao Shou ignored Tianxiao. He seemed to be immersed in the assembly of the puppet and did not know what was happening outside. "Brother Chu, please wait for a moment," Tianxiao said. Chu Mu nodded. He did not show the slightest dissatisfaction or irritation. Instead, he looked on indifferently. From the outside, it was hard to imagine that such an ordinary middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance and height would actually be the patriarch of the Tianxiao clan. Tianxiao Shou had been assembling the puppet. Chu Mu had also been standing and watching. He did not have any research on the path of puppetry. However, all methods had their similarities. As he watched, he more or less gained some understanding. After a full hour, Tianxiao Shou finally finished assembling the beast-shaped puppet. He did not activate it, so the puppet would not move. "This must be little friend Chu Mu, right? Apologies for the neglect just now," Tianxiao Shou said with a smile. "I should be the one disturbing uncle," Chu Mu said with a smile. "Haha, come, sit." Heavenly Qiao Shou gestured with his hand and sat down on a chair at the side. He looked very casual and didn't seem like the head of a large family at all. Chu Mu and Tianxia also sat to the side. "It is my honor to be able to make friends with you." Tianxiao looked at Chu Mu for a while and smiled. "Father is right. It is indeed my fortune to be able to befriend Brother Chu." Tianxiao also smiled. The father and son were quite good with words. "Being able to become friends with Brother Tianxiao is also my good fortune," Chu Mu said. "You two don't need to compliment each other," Tianxiao Shou said with a smile. "I want to congratulate little friend Chu Mu for being selected into the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Uncle, I just passed the Flying Heaven Pavilion's preliminary selection. Whether I can enter the Flying Heaven Pavilion is still unknown," Chu Mu said. "I believe that with your talent, you will definitely be able to become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion," Tianxiao Shou said. He seemed to be more confident than Chu Mu. Of course, Chu Mu was very confident in becoming a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Apart from his talent in cultivation, he was impeccable in all other aspects. I don't have anything good, so I will use this Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill as a congratulatory gift. I wish, little friend, that you will stand out in the Flying Heaven Pavilion and become the champion of your generation. A finely carved white jade box appeared in Tianxiao Shou's hand and he handed it to Chu Mu. Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill. Chu Mu was shocked. There was a pill like this in his inherited memories. It was a very high-level pill that was suitable for Spirit Condensation Realm swordsmen to use. It could allow a Spirit Condensation Realm swordsman to advance a small level in one go. It had to be known that at the Spirit Condensation Realm, it would normally take 3 to 4 years to go from initiation to minor accomplishment, 4 to 5 years to go from minor accomplishment to Deshang, and 5 to 6 years to go from Deshang to great perfection. A single Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill could allow a Spirit Condensation Realm swordsman to break through from initiation to minor accomplishment, then from minor accomplishment to Deshang, and finally from Deshang to great perfection in a short amount of time. With Chu Mu's current attainments in the Tao of Pills, even if he had enough ingredients, he still wouldn't be able to refine the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill. Uncle, as the saying goes, one can't accept a reward without doing anything. This is too precious. Chu Mu declined. Little friend, please accept it. Although the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill is precious, I think the friendship between you and my son is even more precious. Tianqiashu smiled. Not to mention, this is my congratulatory gift. At this point, Chu Mu didn't decline anymore. He accepted the white jade box and held it gently in his palm. After chatting for a bit more, Chu Mu and Tianqia left. Inside the green bamboo garden, Chu Mu took out the white jade box and opened it. A faint fragrance immediately spread out and entered his nostrils. It refreshed his mind and refreshed his mind. The sword origin in his body flowed faster and became very active. Chu Mu wasn't in a hurry to take this pill. Instead, he carefully studied it with his current attainments in the Tao of Pills. He then continued to integrate the inherited memories to deepen his attainments in the Tao of Pills. The Dragon Tiger Profound Dan was jade white in color, glossy and smooth. There were veined patterns on it, and if one looked carefully, they would discover that those veined patterns formed the shape of a dragon and a fierce tiger. When one stared at those veined patterns, it felt as if a gust of wind blew out from the Dan, and then a fierce tiger rushed out, and then a cloud floated, and a dragon appeared in the cloud. The wind came from the tiger and the cloud came from the dragon. The roars of the tiger and the cries of the dragon rose and fell one after another, shaking one's blood and chi. After studying it for a while, Chu Mu withdrew his gaze. Good pill. Although his attainments in the Tao of Pills had improved after careful study, it still couldn't reach the level of refining the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill. Of course, if Chu Mu had enough ingredients, he could slowly try to refine it. After failing a few times, he would eventually succeed. He opened his mouth and threw the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill into his mouth. It melted in his mouth and flowed down his throat into his stomach. Immediately, the Dragon Tiger Profound Pill's medicinal strength dissolved. In Chu Mu's stomach, waves of dragon roars and tiger roars continuously rang out. His stomach rapidly swelled and quickly contracted. Expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. Wave after wave of medicinal strength violently surged out. Dispelling distracting thoughts, Chu Mu calmly operated the Sky Baron's sword origin. He began to absorb the power of the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill. Strand after strand of power entered the Sky Baron's sword origin, constantly strengthening the Sky Baron's sword origin. Chu Mu's cultivation base, under his daily perseverance, rose little by little. Now, he was close to the peak of the Deshang of the Divine Condensation Realm. At this moment, under the pure and enormous medicinal power of the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill, it began to clearly rise. Very quickly, the Sky Baron Sword Origin rose to the peak of the Deshang of the Divine Condensation Realm. It began to stride towards the great circle of the Divine Condensation Realm. Chu Mu placed great importance on the foundation. Therefore, when his cultivation base reached the peak of the Deshang of the Divine Condensation Realm, he did not rush to break through to the great circle of the Divine Condensation Realm. Instead, he deliberately suppressed the breakthrough to refine the Sword Origin. After the Sword Origin was refined, the impurities were removed and the quantity would naturally decrease. He needed to replenish his cultivation base in time to not retreat. In this way, the medicinal power of the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill would be constantly consumed. Time slowly passed. With the addition of the sharpness of the green bamboo garden, Chu Mu's refinement of the Sky Baron's Sword Origin became smoother and more nimble. Not long after, the Sky Baron's Sword Origin was refined to the limit and stabilized at the peak of the Deshang of the Divine Condensation Realm. It was time to make a breakthrough. As he continuously absorbed the remaining medicinal power of the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill, the quantity of the Sky Baron's Sword Origin increased little by little. With a pop, his chi and blood churned. The Sword Origin shook endlessly. His dantian contracted and expanded in an instant. A powerful force filled his entire body. Great circle of the Divine Condensation Realm. There was still a small amount of medicinal power left in the Dragon Tiger Profound Core Pill. Chu Mu also quickly absorbed this medicinal power to stabilize his cultivation base at the great circle of the Divine Condensation Realm. The Sword Origin of the Great Circle of the Divine Condensation Realm was 30% stronger than that of the Deshang of the Divine Condensation Realm. This allowed the offensive power of Chu Mu's sword skills to increase slightly. After finishing the cultivation of the Sword Origin, Chu Mu began to cultivate the Divine Will Secret Technique, Eye of the Sword. He continued to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Tian Xiaoyu came again to find Chu Mu for a drink. "Brother Chu, this is a good wine that my father has kept for many years. Don't even talk about drinking it. I can't even take a look at it." Tian Xiaoyu took out a jade wine bottle from her interspatial ring and smiled at Chu Mu. "This time, my father took the initiative to give it to me to entertain Brother Chu." As she spoke, Tianqia placed the dishes on the table and opened the cork of the wine bottle. Suddenly, an indescribable fragrance filled the air. That fragrance actually had a form. It was in the form of white smoke. It rushed up from the mouth of the wine bottle like a dragon coming out of the water and soaring into the sky. "This wine is called Hidden Dragon Rises to Heaven." Tian Xiaoyu pointed at the dragon-shaped white smoke and said to Chu Mu, "It's more than 300 years old." 300 years! Chu Mu was shocked. The longer a wine was stored, the more fragrant it would be. The older the wine, the more valuable it would be. Originally, Hidden Dragon Rises to Heaven had an extraordinary value. If it was stored for 300 years, its value would increase by a few hundred times. This small bottle of wine was estimated to be about 1 jin. Chu Mu couldn't estimate its value. However, no matter how valuable it was still wine. Since it was wine, it was meant to be drunk and tasted. Otherwise, no matter how valuable it was, it wouldn't be reflected. "Hurry up and have a cup," Chu Mu urged. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he liked to taste good wine, especially good wine that he hadn't tasted before. Of course, he wouldn't deliberately pursue it if he didn't have it. Tian Xiaoyu laughed and began to pour a cup of wine for Chu Mu. In fact, he was here to send Chu Mu off, because today was the day that Chu Mu would head to the Flying Heaven Pavilion. After that, he would follow the disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion to the Flying Heaven Pavilion. After that, Tian Xiaoyu didn't know when he would be able to see Chu Mu again. "Brother Chu, this cup is for you." Tian Xiaoyu raised his cup and said to Chu Mu, The two of them drank one cup after another with delicious and exquisite dishes. Unknowingly, one gene of hidden dragon rises to heaven was finished by the two of them. "This wine is the most delicious wine I've ever tasted," Chumu said. "Brother Chu, I heard that the Flying Heaven Pavilion has a kind of wine that's even more delicious than hidden dragon rises to heaven. The next time we meet, you have to bring some for me to try." Tian Xiaoyu smiled. "Okay." Chumu agreed without hesitation. He got up and strode out of Green Bamboo Garden. Chapter 920. The Shattered Star Building, Flying Heaven Pavilion, Sky Splitter Sword Sect, Extreme Black Palace, and Myriad Mountains Manor were only open for 3 days. In other words, they only had 3 days to join these 5 forces. If they didn't seize the opportunity, they would lose the opportunity. No one knew when the next time would be. Of course, there might be other methods, but they were very rare. Once the 3 days were up, the selected people would leave with the disciples of the various major forces and head to the true locations of the 5 major forces. If they missed the deadline, the 5 major forces wouldn't care. To them, unless they were decisive geniuses, they wouldn't care. If they couldn't make it in time, it would be their own loss. The flying ships of the 5 major forces left West Tiger City one after another. Other smaller forces also came to West Tiger City. After all, the 5 major forces only took a small portion of the geniuses away. Most of the geniuses eliminated by the 5 major forces were pretty good for these smaller forces. Seeing the flying ship of the Flying Heaven Pavilion flying out of West Tiger City, Tian Xiaoyu suddenly clapped her hands in realization. "Oh no, I forgot to tell Brother Chu that Xuanji Wudao's sister is also a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. It's just a small matter. Xuanji Wudao's sister shouldn't cause trouble for Brother Chu." Tian Xiaoyu secretly said, "I'll just ask someone to pass this message to Brother Chu." The flying ship of the Flying Heaven Pavilion wasn't as big as the Tianxiao clan's flying ship, but it looked more exquisite. There were beautiful murals of flying in the sky on it. After 3 days, there were about 600 genius swordsmen who passed the preliminary selection of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. It was said that after arriving at the Flying Heaven Pavilion, they would have to go through the next stage of the selection. Only after passing it could they truly become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. However, according to the disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, after passing the preliminary selection, most of them could pass the later stages of the selection and become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. It was worth mentioning that Leng Changfeng, who was defeated by Chu Mu, was also among the 600 people. The speed of the Flying Heaven Pavilion's flying ship was even faster than the Tianxiao clan's flying ship. It had reached 100 times the speed of sound. It was unbelievably fast. The flying ship was more than 5,000 meters above the ground. There were countless layers of clouds, and it was basically impossible to see the ground. On the airship, apart from the disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, most of the other 600 geniuses who had passed the preliminaries were meditating in their rooms. A few of them would chat with each other and make friends. 10 days later, the speed of the flying ship decreased. Chu Mu and the others could feel that they had arrived at the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The flying ship gradually lowered its altitude until it was about 500 meters away from the ground. In front of it, the light was distorted and there was an inexplicable change. Chu Mu and the other geniuses stood on the deck and stared at the twisting light in front of them with wide eyes. It was very beautiful and magnificent. It was as if they were in a dream. The twisting light seemed to transform into a figure flying in the sky on a sword. The flying ship flew forward at a low speed and entered the twisting light. On the seal of the flying ship, countless figures were reflected. The Flying Heaven diagram gave Chu Mu and the others the feeling that they had entered a space-time tunnel and saw a miniature version of the long river of history. So the Flying Heaven Pavilion isn't outside. Chu Mu suddenly understood. The Flying Heaven Pavilion should be inside a complete emptiness realm. Or rather, it should be called a small world. A small world was equivalent to an upgrade of the emptiness realm. It was more complete than the emptiness realm. It formed a world of its own and had its own independent rules. However, it was closely related to the outside great world. After passing through the mountain gate tunnel of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, they truly entered the small world of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The flying ship began to descend. A wave of fresh air assaulted their senses. They felt refreshed and their soared energy became active. The flying ship completely landed on the ground. "Everyone, you can come down now," a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion said. The 600 geniuses jumped down from the flying ship one after another. They looked around curiously. The Flying Heaven Pavilion was one of the 5 most powerful forces in the West Tiger territory. Many geniuses yearned to join the Flying Heaven Pavilion and become its disciples. Now that they had arrived at the place they had dreamed of, the next step was to stay and become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. "I must pass the selection and become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion." Everyone cheered themselves on in their hearts. They were full of confidence. Of these 600 geniuses, a portion came from outside the Western Tiger Great Region, like Chu, while another portion came from the Western Tiger Great Region's native geniuses. Towards a faction like the Flying Sky Pavilion, they had an even greater and clearer yearning. The architecture of the Flying Heaven Pavilion was unique and artistic. Chu and the others were led by a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion to the main hall of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. In order to enter the main hall of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, they first had to pass through a square or the front yard of the main hall. The disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion didn't say a word. He just kept walking forward. They had to pass through the front yard and reach the main hall. The 600 geniuses all followed him. As they walked, they suddenly stopped. Inexplicably, their attention was all attracted by the statue in the middle of the front yard of the main hall. They were all focused on the statue. At first glance, the statue looked very ordinary. It was a person standing with his left and right feet slightly apart. His knees were slightly bent. He was holding a scabbard in his left hand and a sword hilt in his right hand. He was looking up at the sky, as if he was about to draw his sword and lift it up. In the eyes of the crowd, this kind of statue was very normal. After all, there were statues in many places. There was nothing strange about it. But now they couldn't help but feel strange. This seemingly ordinary statue actually attracted all their attention. The strange feeling disappeared without a trace. They were completely immersed in it, unable to extricate themselves. In their eyes, the statue had undergone earth-shattering changes. It was vivid and lifelike, as if it was a real person who had fallen into a deep sleep. The 2 disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, who were leading Chu and the others, also stopped. They turned around to look at Chu and the other 600 geniuses and began to talk. "Seeing them like this reminds me of the time when we first entered the Flying Heaven Pavilion. We were also like this. In the blink of an eye, several decades have passed. Time really flies." One of the disciples sighed. "Yeah. I wonder how many of them will pass the test this time and become a true disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion and our junior brothers." The other person also sighed. "Speaking of which, the number of people who passed the preliminary test this time is much higher than the one we had and the one a few years ago. A few years ago, the Flying Heaven Pavilion had recruited disciples once. However, the recruitment was only for the geniuses of the West Tiger territory. Therefore, the number of people was much lower than this time. Xuanji Wudao's sister also became a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion at that time. At this time, a group of people walked out of the main hall. They were all from the Flying Heaven Pavilion. This is an era where geniuses come forth in large numbers. I remember that the shortest time for the entrance test is exactly 7 minutes. This record has been maintained for hundreds of years. I wonder if anyone can break it? Break the record for the entrance test? I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible either. Senior brother Tian Yi's talent is unparalleled. No one can compare to him. These people stood at the side and chatted casually. They were completely unaffected by the statue. This was because they had already gone through this stage a long time ago. In fact, everyone who had just arrived at the Flying Heaven Pavilion would encounter the same situation as Chu Mu and the others when they passed through the front yard to enter the main hall. They had to comprehend something in order to get out of this situation. Of course, if they didn't comprehend anything after 2 hours, they would automatically get out of this state. However, that would mean that they weren't qualified to enter the main hall of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Therefore, they weren't qualified to become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. This stage was the final test to enter the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Comprehension. The Flying Heaven Pavilion placed great importance on the comprehension of its disciples. If one's comprehension didn't reach the standard, it would be impossible for them to achieve anything in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Chu Mu stared at the ordinary statue. His comprehension was amazing. Soon, the statue began to change in his eyes. It was as if the rust on the statue was falling off, and a trace of vitality appeared on the statue. Gradually, the statue seemed to come alive. Its eyes shone brightly, and the sword in its hand also emitted a trace of sharpness. Immediately, Chu Mu saw a ray of sword light cut across the sky and soar into the sky. It was accompanied by the sonorous sound of a sword being unsheathed. It was long and pleasing to the ear, and it was soul-stirring. After that person unsheathed his sword, he made the first move. Then, he performed one move after another. It was clearly a swordsmanship. Chu Mu stared at that person and memorized every move of the swordsmanship. Every move of the swordsmanship wasn't complicated at all. It was equivalent to an upgrade of the basic swordsmanship. As long as one had a solid grasp of the basic swordsmanship, they would be able to remember most of the moves. Not to mention, Chu Mu had a good memory and comprehension. Every move and style seemed to have been imprinted in his mind. Gradually, Chu Mu had a kind of comprehension. This swordsmanship was a kind of swordsmanship similar to the Sky Desolation swordsmanship or the Sky Extreme swordsmanship. He guessed that there should be 99 styles. Sure enough, when the statue finished performing the swordsmanship, there were indeed 99 styles. This swordsmanship that he didn't know the name of was a swordsmanship that allowed people to cultivate and control their strength until they became one with the sword. 99 styles was the same as the Sky Desolation swordsmanship. However, there were differences in terms of moves and spirit. It focused on the spirit of soaring to the sky. Basically, swordsmen who could refine their sword intent and profound to the 8th transformation level would have good comprehension. However, there were still differences. For example, Chu Mu was at the top. Other than Chu Mu, there were a few people who had better comprehension than others. They comprehended this swordsmanship later than Chu Mu. As soon as he comprehended this swordsmanship, the feeling immediately disappeared. The statue was still a statue and didn't move. Since he wasn't affected, Chu Mu strode forward. As he walked, he was thinking about the differences between this swordsmanship and the Sky Desolation swordsmanship and the Sky Extreme swordsmanship. He didn't notice the shock of the two disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. After a while, they looked at each other. Look, that person passed. This time, it seems less than 15 minutes. Less than 15 minutes. This seems to have broken senior brother Tian Yi's record. They were shocked, extremely shocked. They never thought that someone could break one of the records of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Chapter 921. The Flying Heaven Pavilion was in an uproar, all because of Chu Mu. Ever since the establishment of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, there have been many records in the entrance examination, but they were all broken by later generations. The record from 1,000 years ago was held for 900 years before it was broken by Qin Tianyi. I thought that Qin Tianyi's record would last for 1,000 years or even longer, but who would have thought? I've already investigated. This Chu Mu has a humble background, and comes from the Sky Edge Sword Palace of the Xiling continent. the sky-edged sword palace of the Xiling continent. I remember that it was a very small faction. They say that a dragon can't be raised in shallow water. Who would have thought that there would be such an accident? Such a genius has become a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. If we train him well, his future achievements will not be inferior to Qin Tianyi's. Chu Mu was the first of the 600 swordsmen to pass the examination. After Chu Mu, 3 more people passed, but they took more than 7 minutes. In the end, 400 people passed and officially became disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. As for the 200 people who didn't pass the test within 2 hours, they were regretfully sent out of the miniature world of the Soaring Pavilion. Their fate was up to them. 400 people became disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. This number was obviously more than before. The 400 people gathered in the Flying Heaven Pavilion's main hall. The hall was very spacious, and could accommodate tens of thousands of people at the same time. Besides the 400 disciples, there were also the elders of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. "Let's test your cultivation talent first," one of the elders said. In the world of swordsmen, there were several aspects that were related to their ultimate achievement. Cultivation talent, perception, willpower, soul, luck, and so on. None of these could be missing. The Flying Heaven Pavilion had its own way of testing, which was more accurate. Cultivation talent was tested by a transparent crystal ball the size of a human head. The 400 people were tested one by one. Because Chu Mu was the first to pass the test, his position was at the very front and he received a lot of attention. As the first person to pass the entrance exam and break the 100-year record, everyone's gazes were all focused on Chu Mu. They really wanted to see what level this disciple with extraordinary comprehension had reached in his cultivation talent. He should be of the 2nd rank. I also think it's level 2. I just don't know which level of level 2 he is at. Probably high rank 2, middle rank 2. The pavilion elders began to make guesses through telepathy. As for the 3 people standing behind Chu Mu, they had passed the examination a little later than him. They believed that their perception was outstanding, but they didn't expect that they were actually inferior to Chu Mu. Therefore, they were somewhat unconvinced. They also wanted to see if this person who surpassed them in perception would also surpass them in cultivation talent. Ling Chongfeng, who was defeated by Chu Mu, was also very curious about Chu Mu's cultivation talent. As for his cultivation talent, Chu Mu was very clear in his heart. This was his shortcoming, his biggest shortcoming. It was a shortcoming that he was currently working hard to improve. Under everyone's gaze, Chu Mu walked towards the cultivation talent testing crystal ball. He stretched out his hand and covered the crystal ball. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared inside the crystal ball. It was red and quickly expanded like a whirlpool, filling the entire crystal ball. In the blink of an eye, it turned orange and then yellow. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, silver, gold. 9 colors were constantly alternating and circulating. It was colorful and gorgeous. As the crystal ball's color changed, a force from the crystal ball passed through Chu Mu's palm and entered his body through his arm. Every time the crystal ball's color changed, Chu Mu felt that harmless force flowing through his body and going deeper and deeper. Cultivation talent was very mysterious. It couldn't be touched or seen, but it existed in the deepest part of the human body. When the crystal ball's color changed 9 times, that harmless force had completely penetrated into the deepest part of Chu Mu's body. Even his divine sense was unable to sense it. Soon after, the color of the crystal ball began to change from gold to silver, then to purple, and so on. The harmless energy in his body also began to circulate from the depths of his body, spreading to every corner of his body, not leaving a single bit untouched. Back in the ancient sword continent, Chu Mu had also tested his cultivation talent. However, that test was much cruder than this one. Finally, the crystal ball's color changed back to red. The harmless force in Chu Mu's body also returned to the crystal ball through his arm. The red color disappeared and the crystal ball became transparent again. The final moment had arrived. Everyone's eyes were focused on the crystal ball. 3 breaths felt as long as 3 years. A color appeared in the center of the crystal ball and rapidly expanded. The color also began to change from red to orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue. When the color changed to blue, it suddenly paused and stopped changing at a pure blue color. Blue. Suddenly, the pavilion elders and the disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion were all dumbfounded. Their faces were full of disbelief, as if they had seen a ghost. Low rank 5, the color changes in the crystal ball, red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, silver, gold, corresponded to cultivation talent from rank 9 to rank 2. Blue corresponded to rank 5 cultivation talent. Every rank and every color had different shade. The lighter the color, the lower the rank, and the darker the color, the higher the rank. For example, Chu Mu's light blue color meant low rank 5. There must be a mistake. With such comprehension, how can his cultivation talent be so low? There was a lot of discussion. They couldn't believe that a person who broke the record of the Flying Sky Pavilion's entrance examination in terms of comprehension would only have a cultivation talent of the 5th grade. In their minds, the 3rd grade was already very low. Stunned, everyone was stunned. There must be a mistake. Test it again, one of the pavilion elders said flatly. Chu Mu didn't say anything and tested it again. Everyone hurriedly abandoned all distracting thoughts and looked at it with full concentration again. When the color on the crystal ball was fixed again, they felt a kind of disappointment from the bottom of their hearts. Light blue color meant low rank 5 cultivation talent. How could this be? How could this be? One of the pavilion elders couldn't help feeling disappointed and muttered, looking very depressed. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Another pavilion elder said absent-mindedly and almost beat his chest and stamped his feet. Great hope was exchanged for great disappointment. That kind of gap was unbearable for them. For a moment they were sad and happy. Among all of them, Chu Mu was the calmest because he knew how his cultivation talent was. Rank 5, it was just that he didn't know which level of rank 5 he was at. Strictly speaking, as long as one was in the 5th rank, they would be able to cultivate to the limit of the divine condensation realm. However, the difference between the low and high 5th rank lay in the speed and time required to reach the limit of the divine condensation realm. Under normal circumstances, it was naturally easier for high rank 5 to reach the limit of the divine condensation realm. It was hard to describe the feeling in their hearts. After a while, the pavilion elders finally calmed down. They waved their hands and asked Chu Mu to stand aside and wait for the second person to take the test. The second person was naturally the swordsman who passed the test after Chu Mu. His name was Fang Qingtian, and he was a disciple of the Fang family in the West Tiger Territory. His sword essence profound had reached the limit of the 8th revolution and he had comprehended 7 profound meanings. If Chu Mu hadn't appeared, he would have been the most eye-catching person among the new disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Unfortunately, he was only slightly slower than Chu Mu. He had only comprehended the sword technique after a quarter of an hour and passed the test. The difference in time was very short, so he was very dissatisfied. Now, in the cultivation talent test, Chu Mu was only at rank 5. On this point, he could firmly trample on Chu Mu. This was because he had also tested his cultivation talent before, and it was far above rank 5. Fang Qingtian's palm landed on the crystal ball, and the color of the crystal ball immediately changed. Not long after, the color finally settled down. It was gold, pure gold. Middle rank 2. Exclamations suddenly sounded. The pavilion elder's depression caused by Chu Mu was swept away in an instant. Good, it's really pure gold. Middle rank 2 cultivation talent. Good, good. This is the Flying Heaven Pavilion's honor. The pavilion elders all laugh. There weren't many people in the Flying Heaven Pavilion with cultivation talent who had reached middle rank 2. Every one of them was valued and focused on training. It had been tens of thousands of years since the Flying Heaven Pavilion was built, and there hadn't been an upper rank 2. At most, there were only a few middle rank 2 cultivators, and there weren't many of them. Even the cultivation talent of middle rank 2 was rare. Fang Qingtian looked at Chu Mu proudly. After being surprised, Chu Mu regained his composure. No matter what other people's talent was, it was still their own. Only by working hard to improve one's own talent would it belong to oneself. Fortunately, he had the heaven-seizing technique, which defied the natural order. Although it couldn't increase one's strength, it could improve one's cultivation talent. If others knew that he had the heaven-seizing technique, he would definitely become a target. No matter what, Chu Mu wouldn't say it out loud. Fang Qingtian's joy dispelled Chu Mu's depression. Then, the third person was tested for his cultivation talent. It was slightly worse than Fang Qingtian's, but it was also at middle rank 2. The fourth person's cultivation talent was also at middle rank 2. One by one, they were tested. After all 400 people were tested, Chu Mu's cultivation talent was the lowest. It was much lower than the second-last person. Even the second-last disciple's cultivation talent was at middle rank 4. Everyone knew the difference between middle rank 4 and lower rank 5. This meant that a middle rank 4 could at least cultivate to the creation realm. Deshang could cultivate to the full creation realm if he worked hard and spent more time. However, a lower rank 5 could only cultivate to the limit of the God condensation realm. That was the limit. His comprehension broke the record, but his cultivation talent was the lowest in the history of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Was he a genius or mediocre? Chapter 922. Geniuses and mediocre people were often separated by a fine line. Chu Mu's strange behavior caused the Flying Heaven Pavilion's elders to be very passive. This was the first time they encountered such a situation. As everyone knew, a person's talent had many aspects, and these aspects were often related to each other. In other words, if a person's cultivation talent was very high, then their soul comprehension and other aspects would not be too bad. This was determined when a person was an embryo and was innate. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, among the various talents, one was obviously weaker. Even so, it would not be too weak. For example, Chu Mu's cultivation talent was only low stage rank 5, but his comprehension was so high that he broke the Flying Heaven Pavilion's record. He could be said to be the person with the strongest comprehension in the history of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. There was a huge gap between the two extremes. After the cultivation talent test, it was time to check the degree of refinement of the sword intent and profound, as well as the number of profound comprehensions. The test method was to follow the order. Everyone had to release their sword intent and profound meanings in order to achieve the strongest power. It was best to start with Chu Mu. Vaguely, there seemed to be a rumbling sound. A shocking sharpness gushed out from Chu Mu's body in an instant. It was as if a sword of the void was about to pierce through the clouds and sever time and space. That sharpness caused people to shiver all over. Peak rank 8 sword intent. Someone exclaimed. Immediately, Chu Mu withdrew his sword intent, and a golden sharpness gushed out of his body again, cutting through everything. Peak rank 8 metal profound. Immediately, the sharpness changed and wind blew. The golden sharpness turned green, and with a whistling sound, everyone was directly entangled by the wind, as if they were going to fly into the sky. Peak rank 8 wind profundity. The power of the wind instantly became scorching hot, burning everything as if it was going to incinerate everything. Peak rank 8 fire profundity. Peak rank 8 earth profundity. Peak rank 8 water profundity. 5 limit profound meanings. The expressions on the faces of the pavilion elders kept changing. Then, a cold aura spread out, as if it was going to freeze the earth. Peak rank 8 ice profound meaning. Exclamations of surprise rang out. The pavilion elders began to feel both joy and sorrow. 6 ultimate profound meanings. A total of 6 ultimate profound meanings. However, things were not over yet. A trace of vitality appeared, and it continued to grow. Everyone seemed to be able to see a verdant and lush forest. Peak rank 8 wood profundity. The exclamation grew louder. 7 ultimate profound meanings. The pavilion elders all clutched their chests, unable to bear the shock. Thinking for a while, Chu Mu continued to release his Upanishad. This time, it was the Thunder Upanishad. 8 metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, ice, lightning. 8 ultimate profound meanings. 8 types. Our Flying Heaven Pavilion's most outstanding disciple, Qin Tianyi, only had 7 types. Chu Mu, he actually has 8 types. Several pavilion elders almost fainted, and the disciples and new disciples of the Flying Heaven Pavilion were all dumbfounded. Their minds froze, and they couldn't think straight. 8 ultimate profound meanings were all refined to peak rank 8. They couldn't accept it for a while. After a full 15 minutes, everyone finally calmed down. The pavilion elders looked at Chu Mu with complicated expressions. Next was Fong Qingtian. Of the profundities he comprehended, 6 of them were refined to peak rank 8, 1 was only refined to rank 2, which was very rare. The other 2 disciples with low middle grade 1 cultivation talent also comprehended 6 types of profundities. The 400 new disciples were all tested. The one who comprehended the most profundities was Chu Mu, with 8 types. The lowest was 3 types. Basically, the more one comprehended, the higher the level of their Upanishad. For example, the disciples who comprehended 3 types of profundities were limited to the early stage of rank 8. Next, it was time to distribute them. The Flying Heaven Pavilion has 3 courtyards. The Flying Heaven Courtyard, the Flat Sky Courtyard, and the Soaring Sky Courtyard. You will be assigned to one of the 3 courtyards. Fong Qingtian, Wang Jinxin, Qingyi. A pavilion elder opened his mouth, and his aged voice rang through the great hall. He read out 30 names in a row. Fong Qingtian, Wang Jinxin, and Qingyi were the disciples that passed the entrance exam a bit later than Chu Mu. These 30 people were all geniuses that reached the 2nd rank after the exam. The 30 people whose names were called all took a step forward. You will enter the Flying Heaven Courtyard to cultivate. The pavilion elder said. Yes. The 30 people answered proudly. Following that, the cabinet elder read out another 220 names. These people were tested for their cultivation talent. They were all of the 3rd grade, and there were differences between them. You will enter the Flat Sky Courtyard to cultivate. Yes. The 220 people answered in unison. Following that, the secretary announced 149 names. These 149 people all took a step forward. They were all disciples whose cultivation talent had reached the 4th rank. Most of them were at the advanced 4th rank, and a small number of them were at the intermediate 4th rank. None of them were lower than the intermediate 4th rank. You will enter the Soaring Sky Courtyard to cultivate. The pavilion elder said, although your cultivation talent is the lowest, as long as you work hard, your future achievements won't be any worse than others. This was a motivational sentence. Up until now, the pavilion elder had announced a total of 399 people. There was only one name that hadn't been announced yet, and that was Chu Mu. Why? Because whenever the pavilion elders thought of Chu Mu, they would feel their stomachache. All kinds of feelings of regret and sorrow welled up in their hearts. There was an indescribable feeling in their hearts. Why did the heavens have to be like this? While giving him such high perception, they also gave him such low cultivation talent. Was it because his perception was too shocking that the heavens were jealous of him? In the history of the Flying Heaven Pavilion's 3 courtyards, the Soaring Sky Courtyard was the leader and had the fewest disciples. Those who could enter the Soaring Sky Courtyard were all disciples with cultivation talent of rank 2. These people were usually able to temper their sword intent and profound to the late or peak of the 8th revolution. The number of profound they comprehended was usually no less than 5. With their talent and hard work, coupled with the cultivation environment and resources of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, as long as they didn't die prematurely, their future achievements wouldn't be bad. At the very least, they would be able to surpass the King Realm and become an expert above the King Realm. As for the Flat Sky Courtyard, it was in the middle of the 3 courtyards and had the most people. It was the place where disciples with cultivation talent of rank 3 stayed. Their sword intent and profound had been tempered to the late or middle stage of the 8th revolution. The number of profound they comprehended was no less than 4. Some had comprehended as many as 5. At the bottom of the 3 courtyards was the Soaring Sky Courtyard. This name was given to encourage the disciples of the Soaring Sky Courtyard to cultivate diligently and grasp every opportunity to improve themselves. In the end, they would soar to the heavens. Unfortunately, the Soaring Sky Courtyard hadn't produced any outstanding geniuses so far. It couldn't be helped. The determining factor of innate talent was very obvious. The disciples who were assigned to the Soaring Sky Courtyard all had cultivation talent of rank 4. Their sword intent and profound had been tempered to the early or middle stage of the 8th revolution. The number of profound they comprehended was either 3 or 4. Chu Mu's perception had broken the record set by Qin Tianyi. This was equivalent to setting a new record for the entrance examination of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. For the Flying Heaven Pavilion, which placed emphasis on perception, such a high level of perception was worthy of celebration. Moreover, his sword intent and profound had been tempered to the peak of the 8th revolution. The number of profound he comprehended had also reached an unprecedented 8. How could the pavilion elders not be overjoyed by such a genius? However, his cultivation talent was only at the low stage of the 5th grade. With such a cultivation talent, Chu Mu was destined to be unable to break through to the divine condensation realm. No matter how outstanding his perception was, no matter how many profound he comprehended, his cultivation would be stuck at the peak of the divine condensation realm for the rest of his life. At most, he would be able to contend against ordinary king-level expert. A divine condensation realm expert contending against a king-level expert. This was an extremely shocking matter. However, when facing a truly powerful king-level expert, it was useless. Perhaps within 10 years, Chu Mu would be able to dominate the same batch of disciples. But what about 10 years later? For an extreme genius like Chu Mu, the pavilion elders couldn't make up their minds at the moment. How should they allocate him? Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. He stood at the side and waited for the result. He knew his own situation, so he wasn't flustered. Chu Mu, go and rest for now. We'll tell you the result after we've discussed it. Unable to make up their minds, one of the pavilion elders spoke up. All right. Chu Mu wasn't in a hurry either. He left under the lead of a disciple from the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Everyone looked at him with pity and gloating. After the allocation, the new disciples headed to the 3 courtyards under the lead of a disciple from the Flying Heaven Pavilion. What a pity, what a pity, what a pity! The 5th pavilion elder sighed. Don't feel pity. Since things have come to this, let's think about how to deal with Chu Mu, said the 6th pavilion elder. With his perception and talent, he should belong to the Flying Heaven Court. He might even become the chief disciple of the Flying Heaven Court in the future. But this cultivation talent, why, low stage of the 5th grade is too low. Don't tell me we have to expel Chu Mu? The 7th pavilion elder said weakly. No, absolutely not. After passing our Flying Heaven Pavilion's entrance test, he's a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Unless he betrays the Flying Heaven Pavilion, we can't expel him. The 4th pavilion elder glared at the 7th pavilion elder. I'm just saying it casually. I don't mean to expel him. The 7th pavilion elder smiled. In my opinion, why don't we do this first? We'll settle Chu Mu in the soaring heaven court and let him cultivate well to build a solid foundation. Meanwhile, we'll try our best to find treasures that can increase his cultivation talent. If we can raise Chu Mu's cultivation talent to the 4th grade, with his talent and perception, he'll definitely be able to dominate the king realm in the future. If there's a chance to raise his cultivation talent to the 3rd grade, then, the 3rd Pavilion Elder said. It seemed to be a beautiful fantasy. All right, it's decided. I can't bear for such a great talent to be trapped in the God condensation realm for the rest of his life, said the 2nd Pavilion Elder. Treasures that can increase one's cultivation talent are extremely rare. It'll be difficult to obtain them. However, we can keep an eye out for them. If there's one, we'll have to get it even if we have to pay a price. But before that, we have to be sure that Chu Mu is loyal to the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The 1st Pavilion Elder concluded. Chapter 9:23. Chu Mu, your situation is rather special. This is the first time we've encountered someone like you in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. After our discussion, we've decided to assign you to the Soaring Sky Court. The 2nd Pavilion Elder summoned Chu Mu and said to him, among the 3 courts of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, the Soaring Sky Court is indeed ranked last. In fact, the founder's purpose in establishing the Soaring Sky Court was to ensure that the disciples of the Soaring Sky Court could continue to accumulate and reach their limit. Then, they could soar to the sky and surpass others. Chu Mu, we don't mean to treat you differently by assigning you to the Soaring Sky Court. We hope that you won't mind. We sincerely hope that you can soar to the sky in the Soaring Sky Court. Chu Mu, you can cultivate in the Soaring Sky Court with peace of mind. You should know that before you break through to the king stage, the more profound your accumulation is, the higher your achievements will be when you break through to the king stage. So, don't be in a hurry to break through. Take it slow and steady. We will also look for treasures that can improve your cultivation talent. Once we find one, we'll get it for you even if we have to pay a price. The 3 Pavilion Elders spoke to Chu Mu one after another. Their tone was not arrogant, but rather a tone of equality and encouragement. This moved Chu Mu a little. Although he didn't know the cultivation of the 3 Pavilion Elders, he was sure that they were far above him. They might be able to kill him in seconds with just a breath. Such experts with such high status were speaking to him with such an attitude. Furthermore, they even explained and encouraged him. Chu Mu couldn't help but feel moved. However, Chu Mu also understood that they were doing this because of his talent. His comprehension had broken records, and his comprehension of profound meanings had also broken record. Moreover, they had all been tempered to the limit of the 8th revolution. This kind of talent was unique in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The only regret was that his cultivation talent was too low. Low rank 5 was a heart-wrenching pain. Chu Mu even thought that the Flying Heaven Pavilion might give up on him, and was prepared to pack up and leave. However, he didn't expect that not only did the Flying Heaven Pavilion not give up on him, they even encouraged him and promised to find treasures for him that could improve his cultivation talent. Regardless of whether they fulfilled their promise or not, Chu Mu felt a sense of acknowledgement towards the Flying Heaven Pavilion. No one in the Flying Heaven Pavilion can compare to you in terms of comprehension, so you should make good use of this advantage. The 5th Pavilion Elder smiled. Our Flying Heaven Pavilion places great emphasis on comprehension because all of our secret manuals are inscribed on the Flying Heaven murals. If one's comprehension isn't high enough, they won't be able to comprehend it. When Chu Mu heard this, he immediately nodded. The sect that paid the most attention to comprehension was indeed the most suitable for him. Hearing about the Flying Sky mural, Chu Mu's interest was immediately piqued. He wanted to see it for himself. Don't be anxious. When Chu Mu's eyes lit up, the pavilion elders knew what he was thinking. They smiled and said, "Every new disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion has a chance to comprehend the Flying Heaven murals. If you want to continue comprehending them, you will need to have enough flying points. However, we believe in you. In other words, they seemed to have full confidence in Chu Mu's comprehension ability. After a while, the pavilion elders encouraged Chu Mu and left. Chu Mu was also led to the Soaring Heaven Pavilion by a disciple of the Soaring Heaven Pavilion. May I ask how I should address you, senior brother? Chu Mu asked. My name is Xia Yunfei. You can just call me senior brother Xia, the disciple leading the way said with a smile. I'll have to trouble you, senior brother Xia, Chu Mu said. It's no trouble, junior brother. Our Flying Heaven Pavilion has 3 pavilions, but it should be 5 pavilions, Xia Yunfei said. 5 pavilions? Chu Mu became curious. The pavilion elders had mentioned 3 pavilions before. There are differences. You already know the 3 pavilions. The 4th one is called the Heaven-Breaking Pavilion, where king-level disciples cultivate. The 5th one is called the Heaven-Breaking Pavilion, where saint-level disciples cultivate. Xia Yunfei was a bit mystifying. King-level disciples are Sword of Gojoseon, right? Are saint-level disciples sword sages? Chu Mu was shocked. In his mind, sword sages were a group of people who stood at the peak of swordsmen. They were the peak existences. Such existences could dominate a region wherever they went. However, in the Flying Heaven Pavilion, they were just a group of disciples? Junior brother, you're right. King-level disciples are indeed Sword of Gojoseon. However, saint-level disciples are not sword sages. They are disciples who have reached the Nirvana realm and have the potential to become sword sages, Xia Yunfei said with a solemn expression. Chu Mu nodded. He felt that this was reasonable. On the way to the West Tiger territory, he had learned about the existence of the creation realm. He had asked Lingyun about the realms after the spirit condensing realm. Lingyun thought that since Chu Mu was going to enter the West Tiger territory, his future achievements would definitely be beyond the creation realm. Therefore, he had explained it to Chu Mu in detail. The realm above the spirit condensing realm was called the creation realm. As the name implied, it had the power of creation. One could clearly feel the fluctuations of the power of rules and comprehend them. This realm belonged to the king realm. The realm above the creation realm was called the Nirvana realm. This realm was the transition of the essence of life. Cultivation was to start from the most ordinary level of life. As one's cultivation increased, one's level of life would gradually increase until it transformed. The 9 transformation realm was the first transformation for a swordsman. However, it was more of a transformation in the form of cultivation. It had little to do with one's level of life. After that, the origin realm, one's level of life would increase slightly and one's lifespan would increase significantly. In the spirit condensing realm, one's level of life would increase again and one's lifespan would increase again. The creation realm was the 3rd small increase in the level of life. However, this increase was only superficial. The Nirvana realm, as the name implied, was like a phoenix going through nirvana. It was an increase in the level of life from the deepest level. It was a deep transformation and transition. After the Nirvana realm, it was called the immemorial realm. Through the transformation of nirvana and the transition of life, a swordsman would have the ability to live for eternity. This was the immemorial realm. In the past, Chu Mu had thought that those who surpassed the Sword of Gojoseon were sword sages. However, after Lingyun's detailed explanation, he realized that this idea was wrong. Only those who had reached the immemorial realm and comprehended the origin could be considered sword sages. Many of the swordsmen he thought were sword sages were actually in the Nirvana realm. Originally, Chu Mu had thought that there were many sword sages in the Sky Edge Sword Palace. However, from Lingyun's words, Chu Mu learned that there were only 3 true sword sages in the Sky Edge Sword Palace. In other words, the 3 head instructors. The others who looked like sword sages were actually only in the Nirvana realm. Thinking about it this way, the so-called 100 sword sages of the 100 Saints Alliance on the ancient sword continent should only be in the Nirvana realm. After all, the ancient sword continent was separated from the immemorial world, and was considered a fragment. Its laws were not complete enough. It was impossible for them to comprehend the origin and break through to the immemorial realm. Senior Brother Xia, how many sword sages are there in the Flying Heaven Pavilion? Chu Mu couldn't help but ask. The Pavilion Master, Vice Pavilion Master, and the Pavilion Elders are all sword sages. Actually, I'm not sure how many there are, Xia Yunfei said. In a sect, there would always be experts on the surface, but there would also be experts hidden in the dark. By the way, Senior Brother Xia, what's the origin of the statue in the pavilion's entrance examination? Chu Mu asked again. That statue is the statue of the founder of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, Xia Yunfei said with a serious expression. Xia Yunfei had a serious look on his face. There are some mysteries in it. Those who are smart enough can comprehend a sword art from it. It's called the Lesser Flying Sword Art. Minor Flying Heaven Sword Art, Chu Mu repeated. Junior Brother, it is said that the Ancestor's statue contains not only the Lesser Soaring Sword Art, but it also contains an even greater secret. Junior Brother's comprehension ability has broken Senior Brother Qin Tianyi's record and is number 1 in our Soaring Sky Pavilion. Perhaps you can comprehend this great secret from the statue, Xia Yunfei said half-jokingly. Senior Brother, you must be joking. The founder's statue has existed for countless years. The Flying Heaven Pavilion is never short of geniuses. If there really is a big secret, I'm afraid it has already been comprehended, Chu Mu said with a smile. Xia Yunfei also didn't believe that the ancestral ancestor's statue contained an even greater secret. He had only heard about it from his other senior apprentice brothers, so he was just following the crowd. He also felt that if there really was a big secret, it would have been comprehended by all means. It couldn't be just the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art. Junior Brother, don't underestimate the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art. Perhaps you have already practiced other sword arts that are not inferior to the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art before you entered the Flying Heaven Pavilion. However, the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art is the foundation for comprehending other sword arts in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. You must be proficient or even completely master it, Xia Yunfei said seriously again. Chu Mu finally understood why the Flying Heaven Pavilion required the comprehension of the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art as the entrance test. It turned out that the minor Flying Heaven Sword Art was the foundation for all sword arts in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. However, what other sword arts were there in the Flying Heaven Pavilion? This question was ignorant, but Xia Yunfei didn't despise it. In fact, he didn't know this before he entered the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Before I entered the Flying Heaven Pavilion, I also thought that there were only 2 kinds of sword arts, the basic sword arts and the sword arts for practicing power control. Only after I became a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion did I know that there was a 3rd kind of sword art, which is the sword art for practicing the power of heaven and earth, Xia Yunfei said with a smile. Chu Mu was stunned. The so-called power of heaven and earth referred to the power of conception and profound meaning. He didn't know that there was such a sword art. Metal sword art, wood sword art, wind sword art, thunder sword art, ice sword art, cloud sword art, light sword art, dark sword art, and so on. There are also the 5 elements sword arts of metal, wood, water, fire and earth, wind and thunder sword arts, and so on. In short, there are many, many kinds of sword arts. Xia Yunfei said, however, these sword arts are all on the Flying Heaven mural. Whether you can comprehend them or what kind of sword arts you comprehend depends entirely on your comprehension ability. However, I think that with your comprehension ability, it shouldn't be a problem for you to comprehend a few of them. Xia Yunfei had just entered the Flying Heaven Pavilion, so there were many things that he didn't know. Xia Yunfei spoke from his experience, so Chu Mu naturally memorized them one by one. Every new disciple has a chance to comprehend the Flying Heaven mural. I suggest that you comprehend the sword art mural first. Xia Yunfei said, however, it's not that easy to comprehend the flying heaven mural. You may have to register first before making arrangements. After all, there are 400 new disciples. Under Xia Yunfei's guidance and explanation, Chumu gradually gained a deeper understanding of the flying heaven pavilion. Chapter 924. Green mountains and clear waters, white clouds in the distance, clear as a valley. This was where the soaring sky court was located. Although it was named as a court, it wasn't actually a court, but a mountain-like terrain with countless buildings of all shapes and sizes. It was as if one had entered a world exhibition hall. Under Xia Yunfei's lead, Chumu quickly finished registering in the soaring sky court and obtained his identity sword token. The sword token gave him 100 flying points. Next, he requested to comprehend the flying heaven murals. After registering, he brought Chumu to the arranged residence, a sword tower built inside a huge rock. The huge rock was 100 meters tall and 70 to 80 meters wide. The interior was hollowed out and a sword tower was built inside. It was called the Stone Tower, and it was very interesting. "Junior brother, I'll bring you to a place," Xia Yunfei said to Chumu. He was appointed by the pavilion elder to lead the way for Chumu, so he felt obligated to let Chumu know more about the flying heaven pavilion. Okay. After looking around the stone tower, Chumu left with Xia Yunfei. The place I'll bring you to is called the 100 Battles Pavilion. There is one in each of the 5 courts of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. As the name suggests, it's a place for swordsmen to fight. As he led the way, Xia Yunfei explained. His movement technique was as swift as the wind, and as he flew past, Chumu was right next to him, not at all inferior. Chumu was not surprised. The world of swordsmen was filled with battles. Every sect was like that, so there was nothing strange about it. Having a place for battles was also a way to avoid destruction everywhere. "Oh right, junior brother, there's something I need to tell you first. When we reach the 100 Battles Pavilion, there will definitely be senior brothers who will provoke you. But don't be angry, because this is the rule. They won't deliberately target anyone." Xia Yunfei explained, "When I first came here, it was the same." Okay. Chumu nodded. He wouldn't be angered by ordinary provocations. Only excessive provocations would arouse his anger. The 100 Battles Tower was located in a corner of the Soaring Sky Academy. It only had 1 floor and was very large. The 4 corners of the tower were hollowed out. One could vaguely see the silhouettes of people moving about in the tower. The battle intent emanating from the tower soared into the sky. Even from afar, Chumu and Xia Yunfei could sense the sharp aura coming from the 100 Battles Pavilion. It didn't take long for Xia Yunfei and Chumu to enter the 100 Battles Tower and see the 2 people fighting on the sword battle stage. Chumu recognized that one of the 2 fighting was a new disciple, and the other was an old disciple of the Sky Soaring Academy. The disciples of the Soaring Sky Academy, the Flat Sky Academy, and the Soaring Sky Academy were all in the Divine Condensation realm. They paid attention to their foundations. They planned to comprehend more sword skills while they were in the Divine Condensation realm, laying a solid foundation for their sword skills. After reaching a certain level, they would break through and become the Sword of Gojoseon. The reason was simple. Intent energy was easier to comprehend than profound energy. It was also easier to fuse with them. Because the 2 weren't strong enough, the repulsive force was weaker. Similarly, profound energy was much weaker than principal energy. Comparatively speaking, the repulsive force was weaker, and it was easier to fuse with them. Therefore, those who truly wanted to walk further on the path of swordsmen would pay more attention to their foundations. They would lay the most solid foundation in every realm. On the sword battle stage, the 2 people didn't hold back. They used all kinds of sword skills as if they were mortal enemies. Chumu also noticed that the surface of the 2 people's bodies seemed to be covered with a layer of invisible energy. Below the sword battle stage, There were old disciples and new disciples watching the battle. There weren't many old disciples. Including the one on the sword battle stage, there were only 6. Including Xia Yunfei, there were only 7 in total. Most of them didn't come, but there were dozens of new disciples. Junior brother Xia, you're here. Senior brother Xia, you're here. As soon as Xia Yunfei arrived, the old disciples looked over and greeted him. Then, their gazes shifted to Chu Mu. Senior brothers and junior brothers, let me introduce you. This is Chu Mu. He's a new disciple who was assigned to our soaring sky court. Xia Yunfei greeted them and introduced Chu Mu. Chu Mu, someone exclaimed. Could it be that he's the one who broke senior brother Qin Tianyi's record in the entrance exam? Moreover, it's said that he comprehended 8 profound meanings and refined them to the limit of the 8th revolution, but his cultivation talent is only at the low 5th grade? Another exclamation sounded. Everyone's gazes focused on Chu Mu. It's really Chu Mu. He was actually assigned to our soaring sky court. Although his comprehension ability is outstanding and he has comprehended 8 profound meanings, his cultivation talent is only at the low 5th grade. That's his shortcoming. It's not strange that he was assigned to our soaring sky court. The new disciples also began to discuss. Regarding this, Chu Mu's expression didn't change. He didn't care at all. At this time, on the battle stage, the new disciple was struck by the old disciple's sword skill. The invisible energy on his body shattered, and the new disciple was defeated. He angrily took out 1,000 high-grade origin crystals, and even took out his identity sword token to fight with his opponent's identity sword token. In this battle, the loser has to give the winner 1,000 high-grade origin crystals and 10 flying points, Xia Yunfei explained to Chu Mu. On the battle stage, the old disciple looked at Chu Mu. His eyes shone brightly and fell on Chu Mu's face. He immediately grinned and said, I heard that your comprehension ability is unparalleled. The number of profound meanings you have comprehended is also the number 1 in the Flying Heaven Pavilion. How about it? Do you want to come up and play with me? Don't worry, with the battle stage's protection, you won't be injured. There were many kinds of provocation. Some provocations wouldn't make people angry, while some would make people want to kill. This provocation belonged to the most common kind of provocation. On the way here, Xia Yunfei had already greeted Chu Mu. This kind of situation was normal, so Chu Mu didn't decline. He leaped and landed on the battle stage. Immediately, he felt a surge of energy spread from his feet to his whole body. His body was covered with a layer of invisible energy that didn't hinder his movements. This layer of invisible energy was used to protect the swordsman. The battle here required one to use their true strength. Without protection, one could lose an arm, a leg, or even die. Unfortunately, this kind of protection was only useful on the battle stage. It couldn't be extended to other uses. The price was too high. Since you've been assigned to the Soaring Sky Academy, you're our junior brother. My name is Bai Qili. The opponent introduced himself first, then unsheathed his sword and used a sword skill. Take this. His attack was clean and efficient, without any unnecessary movement. It showed Bai Qili's rich battle experience and exquisite fighting skills. Indeed, the disciples of the Soaring Sky Academy were all at the early or middle 8th revolution in sword intent profound. They had comprehended 3 or 4 kinds of profound meanings. However, they were all old disciples who had experienced hundreds of battles. With the cultivation environment of the Flying Heaven Pavilion, their mastery of profound meanings was even finer. The opponent used an earth-piercing sword skill, which was incomparably fast. Chu Mu's reaction was even faster. He shifted, drew his sword, and counterattacked. A thunderbolt tore through the sky. At the same time, his body was like a ghost, drifting closer to the opponent. His sword was like a flood dragon soaring out of the water. Let's see how strong this strange new junior brother is. The old disciples thought. The new disciples were also watching intently. Up until now, the dozens of new disciples had been on the battle stage. Without exception, all of them had been defeated by the old disciples. It couldn't be helped. In terms of sword intent and profound meanings, as well as the number of profound meanings they had comprehended, they were about the same as the old disciples. They didn't have any advantage. Moreover, the old disciples had joined the Flying Heaven Pavilion a few years earlier than them. Within the soaring pavilion, the older disciples had a cultivation environment and resources that the outside world could not compare to. Their footsteps would only go further than the new disciples. Under such conditions, how could the new disciples defeat the old disciples? It wasn't just the Soaring Sky Academy. It was the same in the Flat Sky Academy and the Flying Heaven Academy. When the new disciples arrived, the old disciples would definitely give them a beating. Simply put, it was a show of strength. The intention was to let the new disciples know their own capabilities. Perhaps in the outside world, they were all highly regarded geniuses. But in here, they were just one of many geniuses. They had to adjust their mentality in order to achieve something. Not only did the elders tacitly approve of this, they even encouraged it. After exchanging blows a few times, Chu Mu had a basic understanding of his opponent's strength. Bai Qili was indeed much stronger than the average early-stage 8th Revolution swordsman. In terms of sword intent and profound meanings, Bai Qili was a level higher than him. Perhaps this was the result of cultivating all kinds of sword art. If Chu Mu's sword intent and profound meanings were only at the early stage of the 8th Revolution, it would indeed be difficult for him to defeat Bai Qili. However, Chu Mu's sword intent and profound meanings were at the peak of the 8th Revolution. When the human tier 3rd grade Earth-piercer sword skills collided, Chu Mu's volcanic eruption was even more powerful. The aftershock struck Bai Qili's body, instantly shattering the invisible energy around him. "Junior brother, you win." Bai Qili was startled at first, then he smiled bitterly. He had never imagined that he would lose to a new disciple with his strength. He took out 1,000 high-grade origin crystals and gave them to Chu Mu. At the same time, he also gave 10 flying points to Chu Mu. "This new disciple is very strong," the other senior disciples exclaimed. The situation was beyond their expectations. Definitely. After all, junior brother Chu's sword intent and profound meanings have been refined to the peak of the 8th Revolution. Although his profound meanings aren't as refined as ours, in terms of absolute strength, he clearly surpasses us. Similarly, a human tier 3rd grade Earth-piercer sword skill is much more powerful. Under the offset effect, the aftershock is comparable to a human tier 2nd grade Earth-piercer sword skill. Xia Yunfei analyzed. This junior brother's strength is indeed very strong. Unfortunately, his cultivation talent is only at the 5th grade. If he was at the 3rd grade, perhaps he would be able to dominate the king level. Everything depends on effort. In the immemorial world, there are treasures that can raise one's cultivation talent. Although they are rare and difficult to obtain, perhaps junior brother Chu's luck is outstanding and he will be able to obtain them. Let's not talk about this first. Since junior brother Bai has lost, someone needs to defeat junior brother Chu and give him a warning. As soon as he finished speaking, one of the senior disciples rose into the air and teleported to the 100 battle stage.